Good morning, board members. Good morning, everybody. I'm calling to order the January MTA Board Meeting. Let's first of all hear the usual safety announcement, and then we'll go to public speakers.
Your safety is of the foremost importance to the MTA. Therefore, we ask that you listen and adhere to the following instructions. If you witness an emergency, notify emergency personnel in the room and call 911 immediately. Please follow any audible instructions provided through the public address system or visually on screens in the event of an emergency. If an alarm sounds, wait for a public address announcement and follow instructions. If told to go to another floor or to evacuate the building, leave all unessential items behind and use stairwell A just across the main hallway or stairwell B down the hallway past the elevators. If you have a mobility disability or cannot self-evacuate, please proceed to stairwell D or E for assistance by MTA staff or emergency personnel. An automated external defibrillator, AED, for use by trained personnel is in the main hallway just past the elevators. If you need assistance during an evacuation, please tell an MTA staff member or emergency personnel. Thank you and have a safe day.
Thank you. Lucille, our proctor, would you lead us through public speakers?
Good morning, Chair and Board. We have 17 members of the public registered to speak today. We ask that all public speakers adhere to the MTA's rules of conduct and decorum. And as a reminder to public speakers, in the interest of time and fairness to all, we limit everyone to 2 minutes. Please be aware that there will be a warning beep to remind you that you have 30 seconds to conclude your remarks. The first speaker today will be John Padula, followed by Christopher Greif.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is John Padula. I'm a supervisor with Educational Vision Services from New York City Public Schools. I'm also a member of the Advisory Committee for Transit Accessibility. Jano, felt really good after Monday's Transit Committee meeting. Had 2 fantastic presentations. Chris P. presented on paratransit. I think we're actually going to make it out of the Stone Age this year and join the modern day with some up-to-date operations for Accessoride. Q gave an excellent presentation talking about long-term, broader accessibility issues and needs. Both of these guys gave me a little hope on what's usually a manic Monday. As a New Yorker trying to live my best blind life in 2024, my concerns, my anxieties are specific. They're blindness specific, right? Blindness is a non-visual approach to a visual world. I don't have access to visual information. Somebody with a mobility disability that uses a wheelchair, their issues are different. My issues are visual, their issues are more vertical, if you will. At the end of the day, the trepidation we all feel when trying to access a subway is real. And that we do have in common. So I just want to support my colleagues that really need reliable elevator access. And I know you can't talk about an active lawsuit. I understand that. But we do need to work together. There's a time to fight and there's a time to collaborate. And I think at this point, we've done a lot of good work together. And I think we can have these conversations to assuage people's anxieties and to let people not feel as vulnerable. I think we can do this. I think we can work together. We can have these conversations. A kingdom divided amongst itself cannot stand. My name is John Padula. Thank you very much.
Our next speaker is Christopher Greif, followed by Jean Ryan.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Christopher D. Greif. As an advocate for people with disabilities for over 30 years, one thing I'm going to say thank you to the MTA, because there are some things we are getting things done. It may take years or a century, but we still have to work on a lot of things. For starters, I hope that everyone on the YouTube channel is hearing this very clearly. The congestion price is not just a full fare, but there are also deals about accessibility, reduced fare, and some areas for options of more information that's on that book. We in the areas and community, we need to make sure that everyone gets that information out there. Share the information and put your comments in. Today, now, in the 2024. We also hope to see in the near future, in the 2024, part of the new year, is a customer who is a senior or a person with a disability who wants to go into the city during this time in the morning has to pay a full fare price on Metro North and Long Island Railroad, which is not acceptable. We pay the reduced fare going home. Why can we not pay it going into the city, reduced fare? There is a lack of communications because there is a lot of issues, but we need to fix that now, in the present. Because we in the disability community and the seniors need to get easier access, especially with the special assistant buttons that need to be more on the railroads today. And when I say railroads, that's including Metro North, and all the stations that we have needs to be there. And I hope to see our newer trains, the R211T and A. Well, A is running excellent, but I hope to see the R211T so everyone can get a chance to get on a train they can see, enjoy, and see on other lines. Thank you, everyone.
Our next speaker is Jean Ryan, followed by Jack Nuremberg.
Good morning. I'm Jean Ryan. Good morning. Can you hear me? Yes. Okay. I'm Jean Ryan, president of Disabled in Action in Metropolitan New York. The gap between subway cars and the platform has always been a problem for people with disabilities. About 20 years ago, at an ADA CCC meeting with the MTA, Frida Zames, a former president of DIA, proposed having an international contest to solve the gap problem in the New York City subway system. I am reiterating that call. Let's do it. And not just with students. Put it out there for engineers and design people who can think outside the box. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Jack Nuremberg, followed by Tasha Larabors.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Jack Nuremberg. I'm the Vice President of Passengers United. And I do want some clarification on one thing, and that is, what exactly is the ultimate goal of congestion pricing? Is it to clean up the air and reduce the number of cars on the road, or is it to generate the funding for the capital program? And while many see these two goals as kind of working together, if you look at the logic, if you really want to reduce the number of cars on the road, and if that's the ultimate goal, what does fewer cars mean? Fewer cars actually paying the toll. So if that was the actual goal, and given that we're not really seeing, and it's been admitted here that we're not seeing any real increases in subway and bus service, same thing with the commuter rail, to accommodate the increase in ridership, the MTA seems to be relying on that fact that people will still drive into the city, therefore kind of defeating the goal of cleaner air. So I think that's something that I think the MTA one is coming to actually putting out advertising and actually being transparent to the public about the plan. I would just really make sure to get that right, because ultimately that could be a bit misleading. And I do want to make one thing clear. I have heard in this boardroom as well complaints about people using Access-a-Ride having to pay the tolls. No Access-a-Ride passenger should be paying the tolls for congestion pricing. None of them. That would be against the law. That would be against the terms of the plan. And ultimately, yeah. So please, let's just get this right. Thank you very much.
Our next speaker is Tasha Larabors, followed by Jesse Figueroa.
Good morning. My name is Tasha Larabors. I work for Center for Independence of the Disabled, New York, transportation and voting organizer. I'm here to once again talk about the Access-a-Ride. One of the issues, common thing that I hear about from a lot of our consumers, problems with assessment centers. And as someone with an invisible disability, oftentimes people with invisible disabilities get denied. I can't tell you a number of stories I've heard from consumers, and as I said, an experience I've had myself. Yes, a person with an invisible disability can walk up and down the stairs. That is not a problem. But once they receive the letter determining, oh, you're denied because you're able to walk up and down stairs, that, like as I said, with an invisible disability, walking up and down the stairs is not the problem. It is the type of disability that you have. As I have said in the past, I have epilepsy. Unfortunately, I do not know when a seizure will hit me. And I have had incidents where I have fallen. So that is something to that's something to keep in mind when it comes to the assessment center. Also, as I mentioned before, situations consumers have had while they were at the assessment centers based on the behavior of the staff. So that's also something to take into consideration. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Jesse Figueroa, followed by Andy Pollock.
Morning, everybody. My name is Jesse Figueroa, U.S. Army veteran, community member of PCAC, ACTA, and the NYCTRC. I'm just here to address that accessibility is improved at various stations, which I'm pleased about. And also 5th Avenue in Bay Ridge and 3rd Avenue in Bay Ridge, also 86th Street in Bay Ridge, has shown slight improvement on bus stops being blocked, which is a good thing. Other than that, I'm happy to see you all. Again, thank you, and God bless.
Our next speaker is Andy Pollock, followed by Charlton D'Souza.
Good morning. Andy Pollock for the record. Passengers United, spelled P-O, 2 L's, A-C-K. So, 2 things we're going to discuss this month. Number 1, safety. And I'm going to give my quick safety report for this month. So far this month, we've had 2 subway derailments. We've had a homicide in transit where a man was shot just because he was breaking up a fight. We've had a teen killed by a subway surfing incident, which thankfully those went down last year. And sadly, we've had numerous people getting struck by trains this month alone. This month might actually set a record for the MTA, believe it or not. So besides on-time performance, which sadly, when I've used the Queens Boulevard line this month, I haven't had my trains run on time. Safety needs to be a priority for this transit authority, because if we don't feel safe riding the subways, then how are you going to bring people to ride the subways once congestion pricing is even implemented? So safety needs to be top key within this organization besides the on-time performance. And second thing I want to bring up before I conclude my remarks, what's going on with Omni? Because I keep getting the notifications, oh, you're a disabled rider, switch to Omni. Problem is, I can't use Omni right now because Nassau Intercounty Express Bus has not implemented it. I ride the N20, the N22, the N24, and the N25 buses, and I cannot use Omni. I still have to use my Metro card. And I'm also going to speak up for the people in Westchester who've been asking for it on the B-line buses. So we just want to know when the Omni readers are going to be put on Nice Bus and B-line. That's all we're asking. So again, my name is Andy Pollock. I'm with Passengers United. Thank you very much.
Our next speaker is Charlton D'Souza, followed by Patrick Condren.
Morning, everyone. Charlton D'Souza, President of Passengers United. Unfortunately, 2024 is getting off to a very, very bad start. We've already had 2 derailments, and now we find out that felony assaults in New York City Transit are way, way up, higher than some 1992 numbers. This is ridiculous. And everyone's been going around at the MTA saying, the subways are safe. The subways are safe. No, they're not safe. So we need Chief Kemper, we need the MT police, but we need our elected officials, the mayor, the governor, to allow the police to do their jobs. And they have to be allowed to, ban repeat offenders from the system. And they also have to crack down on aggressive fare evasion. But why is it that all the MetroCard vending machines are broken and you cannot refill cash and you cannot refill your MetroCards? And even the Omni machines now are breaking down. So that's something that New York City Transit needs to make sure that all the machines are working. Now, in terms of the derailment, so there was a comment made at the committee meeting that the radio's been on a different channel that the train crew was holding. I think it's ridiculous to put something bad like that out there. We cannot blame the train crew. Obviously, there are glitches in New York City Transit where the radios don't work in certain areas. So why don't we focus on that instead of trying to blame the train crews and put it on them? It's not right. That poor motorman who was in the front has been through so much, and for that to have been said at that committee meeting was not appropriate. And again, with the Queens bus redesign, there's still no advertising, no posters, nobody knows about it. Again, New York City Transit, what are you guys doing? So this is Passengers United. Thank you. See you next month.
Our next speaker is Patrick Condren, followed by Michael Ring.
Good morning. My name is Patrick Condren, a resident of New York all my life and in the bus business all my life here in New York City. I represent and work with Bus for NYC Coalition, which is a group of private bus operators, including Hampton Jitney, Academy Bus, a number of others that work with the MTA for many, many years. Previously, with submissions to you, the MTA, and to the public, we applaud the congestion pricing programs and support congestion mitigation and recognize that the private bus operators have been identified as exemption when in commuter service. And looking at that particular item, we suggest that there be a clarification. It seems to be evident this past week on January 26th on the publication that the exemption would be for private buses in private, in commuter and transit services, which there are a number of carriers here who are in the New York area, submit to the National Transit Database, generating money for the state of New York. They're part of the Public Transportation Safety Board plan. They're required in public transport to do this. They're private carriers. They are the support services when systems go down, whether it be in New Jersey or New York. We are the backup systems. And not every one of those companies has a contract to operate that route. So we ask for clarification on the contracted services reference, even though those same companies have had contracts for over 50 years in various places in New York City, in Suffolk County, in Nassau County, in New Jersey, and the region that we have. Additionally, United States DOT identifies these companies as commuter carriers. The exemption might also be considered for tour travel and charter buses because a bus is the most efficient vehicle, whether privately owned or owned by a public and operated agency. Our national associations, ABA and UMA, have also made this statement to you. I want to thank you and look forward to continue working with you as the private bus industry here in New York City.
Our next speaker is Michael Ring, followed by Lisa Daglian.
Hi, I'm Michael Ring. A short visual description. I would say that I'm a 60-year-old white guy wearing a hoodie that says Disabled in Action, the organization that I'm representing today. I'd like to talk about two separate things. On Monday, you guys were talking about the safety fences, the pilot program that's happening up at 191st Street. I decided to take a ride and check them out. I can't speak to the safety efficacy of them. It didn't make much sense to me as a safety thing, but I just want to make sure that you're asking the disabled folk for feedback on what these are about, because to me they seemed like a trip hazard. There were parts of the bolts that were sticking up out of the ground next to every little fence, and getting off a train, if you're looking at the fence, you might not be looking at the ground, you might trip over them. Another thing I wanted to talk about, you're trying to keep the bus lanes clear, and you're working with the DOT and the NYPD. Right in front of this building, there's an accessoride bus stop. On Monday, while my friends and I were having a little protest in front of the building, I observed one of my other friends coming out of an accessoride vehicle in the middle of Broadway, getting out of the car. The vehicle took a few minutes, maybe 5 or 10 minutes, to get the person out. Traffic was backed up probably all the way to City Hall, because in the Accessoride bus stop, there was an Accessoride supervisor's vehicle sitting there empty. It was just occupying the spot. It was there an hour ago when I walked into the building. So you could start by keeping the bus stops clear by telling your staff not to park in them. It would help enormously for the safety of the person getting out of the Accessoride, and it would keep traffic moving because it was a big traffic jam for a short period of time. Easy stuff to fix. And I hope I get to officially look at those safety fences as a person representing the disability community eventually. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Lisa Daglian, followed by Alita Dupree.
Hi, good morning. I'm Lisa Daglian, the Executive Director of the Permanent Citizens Advisory Committee to the MTA, PCAC. Sunday marks Transit Equity Day, observed on Rosa Parks' birthday in recognition of her life and legacy, and is a national day of action to further the goal of providing frequent, reliable, accessible, and affordable public transportation. Thanks to the elected officials who last year funded the MTA like the essential public service it is, New York has made great strides in that direction. We're so fortunate to have champions of the people in Governor Hochul in the legislature and in the advocacy community with which we are proud to work. But there's more to do. Increasing and expanding accessibility across the system is an essential aspect of an equitable transit system. We were thrilled when you settled the lawsuits and committed to making 95% of subway stations accessible by 2055. We share worry that congestion pricing lawsuits are delaying that work. The slide that Jamie showed on Monday with the big hole in 2023 commitments that are directly related to CBDTP delay was unsettling. The work that's suffering isn't just on subways, it's across the system. Hey, New Jersey, maybe you and your pals can explain to millions of riders, including from your side of the river, why you're holding up money for elevators, escalators, signals, tracks, new train cars, and station improvements? It would be an interesting, teachable moment. Even as we continue to pursue congestion pricing to ensure that riders from around the region can benefit from safe, reliable, and frequent transit service, so too are we seeking more equitable fares to allow more people to ride. Expanding the senior and disability Medicare discount to the morning peak on railroads would right a legacy wrong. A weekly city ticket with optional transfers to subways and buses, and encouraging the city to complement the governor's fare evasion forgiveness proposal by bringing fair fares to commuter rails would constitute concrete steps towards making transit affordable.
Thank you for your comment.
We also want to say, Will Schwartz, abandoning us, not fair. We'll miss you terribly. You've been a tremendous asset, and we'll miss you. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Alita Dupree, followed by Cassie Rafucci.
Thank you. Good morning, Chair Jano Lieber and members. Alita Dupree, for the record, she and her with Team Folds. Good to see you again. As I speak generally, I really enjoyed your commemorations of Grand Central Madison, and I watched videos of it, and I have some Grand Central Madison here for you. And it kind of looks like BART in San Francisco. And I often refer to BART as being the people's system, and I used BART yesterday to go to the airport. So thank you for that. Grand Central Madison is very meaningful to me and very welcoming to me. I've been thinking about fare policy. I think we should have a consistent 2-hour fare policy where when you use the subway in succession, the 2-hour window counts. And I've also thought for a while that we should have a consistent senior and disability 24 hours on commuter rail. I have reduced fare with Omni. So when we make things easier, it's less to think about. We can just get on the trains and buses and pay our fare. So I think we should have a fare policy examination of that. And congestion pricing is very important. Congestion pricing is inclusive. It will help me as a person with profound disabilities, as a pedestrian in the streets. Crowded intersections put me at risk. So I hope that we get the congestion pricing turn on. And I think we should have a power content label and work toward having a renewable New York City subway, et cetera. might have to file a public record request for that, because BART has very, very clean electricity. So it's good to be with you, as I want to bring you positive energy from my virtual podium, because I believe you can never have enough subway. It means a lot to me. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Cassie Rafucci, followed by Monica Bartley.
Good morning, Chairman Lieber and board members. My name is Cassie Rafucci, and I'm a member of Passengers United. I would like to address a concern which was brought up to my attention by a transit rider. The New Lots Avenue 3 train station is very bad, its infrastructure is crumbling. They don't put salt on the steps when it snows, and there is a huge lack of communication and especially overcrowding every day on the 3 train. And another issue I would like to address is there was no communication informing N-train riders that there was a small train derailment by Coney Island Rail Yard. There needs to be better communication when there is something like a signal problem or an emergency taking place, so we transit riders can be informed on what's happening. Thank you very much.
Our next speaker is Monica Bartley, followed by Norbert Geis.
My name is Monica Bartley, and I'm a member of Disabled in Action. Today, 27 elevators are out. That may seem like a very small number, but it is in the large scheme of things. But think of someone using a wheelchair, like myself, a mother with a baby stroller, a senior with knee or hip replacement, who needs to use one of these elevators. My commute would be completely messed up if I encountered a broken elevator on my trip. It would take me much longer to get to my destination. We want reliable elevators that are fully maintained. We call on Governor Hochul and the MTA to settle the case. We want working elevators now. Thank you very much.
Our next speaker is Norbert Geis, followed by Sally Wolf.
Good morning. My name is Norbert Geis, and I am with Civics United for Railroad Environmental Solutions. We've had 2 main goals since our founding in 2009. Number 1, eliminate pollution and noise from the 70s of freight locomotives that operate in our neighborhoods. And number 2, contain the waste spillage and blow off from the rail cars that carry waste. I am pleased to report that in 2023, we achieved our second goal. New York State Assembly member Jennifer Raj Kamoor and Senator Joseph Adabo got legislation passed and signed by Governor Hochul to cover all rail cars that carry waste. The legislation went into effect on January 1st, 2024. Let's see how long it takes to get those covers on. So what about the other goals? Eliminating locomotive emissions. Achieving this goal will measurably advance the New York State's Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act mandate. Why? Because each of those locomotives that the Long Island Railroad uses and its operator pollute like 30,000 additional cars a year. Eliminating locomotive emissions within the MTA right-of-way also will comply with Governor Hochul's Executive Order 22, leading by example. We heard back in November from Hector Garcia that the procurement of the work locomotives was delayed and still in the RFP process. Why? This procurement started more than 6 years ago. The New York State Constitution says our families have a right to clean air. The Port Authority has been operating repowered Tier 4 clean locomotives for 8 years now. Why is the board and the unions tolerating this foot dragging by the Long Island Railroad when workers and families could be breathing 95% less pollution from these locomotives? Thank you.
Our next speaker is Sally Wolf, followed by Imani Ramwawi Daster.
Hi, everyone. Happy New Year. Back in September 22, I didn't expect to keep coming when I first met all of you. but I felt really compelled to join you today and actually canceled a doctor's appointment this morning because this felt more important. Given how many unmasked people are coughing extensively that I've personally encountered on recent commuter rails and subways, as you can imagine, as an immunocompromised New Yorker on cancer medicine, this is incredibly and unnecessarily stressful, and I'm one of millions. We as a society have a responsibility to protect our most vulnerable and to ensure their safety. There is no reason we cannot do more, and more is more than nothing. So for example, a masked car or two on each train of the commuter rails, just even the area where the wheelchairs go, and on the subways, if not a masked car, at least including masking and decent behavior on campaigns like the current courtesy counts to remind people that others need space and compassion. This isn't just about COVID, it's about all the airborne viruses that are rampant now too. And it's about the fact that we shouldn't, as anyone who has a health issue, be required to make a decision about whether or not we can ride safely or whether or not we need to walk miles to appointments or whatever else. So given where we are as a society, people need reminders, and the MTA has a responsibility to help all of us be safer, because we as individuals can only do so much. I can choose the cars that I sit in, right? But I can't choose or protect myself when someone else sits behind me. We've learned so much in 4 years. Just help us, just a little. Try it, pilot. I'm sure it will be successful. Thank you for listening.
Our next speaker is Imani Remwawi Doster, followed by Joe Rappaport.
Had to leave my walker over there. Good morning, everyone. My name is Iman Ramawi Doster, and I'm the Senior Community Organizer at the Disability Justice Program for New York Lawyers for the Public Interest. I'm here to talk about Access-a-Ride. Phase 2 of the on-demand service has been useful service, but there are still some issues because Phase 1 was much better. The rationing of the service makes it kind of impossible to use, which forces me to use traditional Access-a-Ride. Not only does that limit my flexibility, but it makes being a professional with disabilities it make me feel like the city does not care that I'm a professional with disabilities. You know, a month ago, I had a medical emergency and I was grateful to have access to the on-demand program. But that cut into my 2 rides, which I was saving for work, meetings, or social gatherings. I keep hearing that the service will be improved and that people will be able to use it in many ways, but I just don't feel it. I know I use Access-a-Ride a lot, about 60 to 70 times a month, which is a lot. But the service is to be used, and I'll never be able to use the trains, ever. Therefore, I need all parts of Access-a-Ride to work. You know, as I'm doing the mental gymnastics of figuring out on-demand and traditional rides, I'm reminded of a city hall hearing that happened in 22, where all the disability, transportation, and the mental health committees all got together to talk about Access-a-Ride. And I'm reminded about the awful effects on my mental health that Access-a-Ride afflicts on me, having to jump around, scheduling appointments, waiting for late trips, arguing with operators, trying to just go places. It makes me not want to go out. It affects my mental health, and I know it affects everyone else's mental health who uses it. It makes me depressed, it gives me anxiety, and it really makes me not feel like I'm a part of the city. Why would you want customers to not feel like they want to use the service? Oh, and that survey that y'all sent out, the link doesn't work, so I can't even take the on-demand survey. So thank you, and make sure Access-a-Ride is for everyone.
Our last speaker is Joe Rappaport.
Thank you. Good morning. I'm Joe Rappaport of the Brooklyn Center for Independence of the Disabled. You may wonder why Access-a-Ride riders and those of us who work with them come to meeting after meeting to talk about this MTA service. And that's because Access-a-Ride is as vital to New Yorkers as any of the transportation services the MTA offers. And that's why it's stunning that the MTA continues to provide a service that looks very similar to what it did 3 decades ago, without taking advantage of new technology like GPS that can make service so much better. For almost all Access-a-Ride riders, you must make a reservation a day or 2 in advance. Your ride may not arrive on time, or it might arrive too early or not at all. You may get to your destination late or an hour early, and there's little riders can do about it. 2017, the MTA actually did do something about it. It provided on-demand service in a pilot test. You've heard people at these meetings praise how life-changing on-demand had been for them. If they needed to go to a meeting at the last moment or meet friends on a whim, on-demand let them. For the first time, accessorized riders had the kind of flexibility in their lives that the rest of us take for granted. Sadly, phase 2 of the on-demand program has largely failed in giving people as much flexibility as they had in phase 1, and enrollment is far below expectations. You can do better. We urge you to figure out how. One last thing for the NYPD. In front of my building in Brooklyn, 25 Elm Place, that's 25 Elm Place, police cars routinely park in the accessorized space. A police cruiser with the license plate 3344 from the 20 precinct was parked there all day yesterday and Monday. I urge you to get it removed and instruct your officers to stop parking in accessorized spaces. Thank you.
Chair Lieber, that concludes public comment.
Thank you. Thank you, Lucille, and thank you to the members of the public who joined us today. Paige Graves, do we have a quorum?
Yes, we do. Thank you.
Okay. Before I do an update, I want to, we need to convene an executive session to allow the board to discuss matters related to litigation. So we're going to break quickly and go in the other room, and then we'll return for the regular business. Motion to go into executive session. Thank you, Ms. Barbas. Mr. Chu, thank you for second. We're in executive session. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Ryan Motley. I'm a stock worker here at East New York Depot. I've been with MTA Bus for 1 year, 4 months. As a stock worker, typical day in the job is issue parts to the maintenance facility. I process transactions. I do express issues, inter-unit transfers. I also help restock parts or receive parts from different manufacturers, give them their respective locations. We do cycle counts to find any discrepancies within our inventory also. Here at the East New York Depot, which is the central maintenance facility, we actually process a lot of parts for various depots.
Here in this stock room, it's a CMF, Central Maintenance Facility. Buses come in for major work, so we store bigger items, high dollar value items, engines, radiators, transmissions, generators, motors. Because when the buses come here, they're here for an extended period of time to get a complete overhaul. So whatever buses that are active in our fleet right now, we have the parts for it.
We also store cleaning products for our cleaners that are located in the depot to help them get their job done. We help the maintainers get the correct parts needed for the buses to make service. You know, we have our regular chores of making sure that the stock room is clean, no tripping hazards on the floor. That's one of our daily chores as stock workers, to ensure the safety of the operation in the stock room itself.
In order to be a good stock worker, one of the best qualities you need to have, the top ones are good retention, safety, responsibility. You know, you want to have that kind of characteristic in you to try to do your best in everything you do and deliver the best. You know, it makes me smile. It makes me feel good knowing that I work for a company where it has a lot to offer. We all play a different role in what we do to keep the buses rolling out.
Without these parts, these buses will be out of service and the customers would be upset. MTA basically moves New York, and that feels great to know that I work for a company like that.
I actually love what I do. This is my 18th year on the railroad.
I love instructing, which is what I'm doing now. I'm instructing student engineers. I love operating as well, so when I can, I still do operate trains, and it's just a great job to have. My name is Inade Maruga Sr. I'm currently a locomotive engineer, special duty instructor. I've been with Metro North for 5 years now.
My name is Robert Sapari, and I'm a training officer, locomotive engineer for Metro North Railroad, and I've been with the MTA for 10 years. My earliest train memory is being in the train with my dad as he was operating. I'm second generation railroad. We actually operated around the same time just before we retired, so that's probably one of my biggest memories. Responsibilities for a locomotive engineer are vast, from dealing with your crews and having a job safety briefing to checking your equipment and making sure all your safety checks are complete.
Safety plays a major role in what we do because of how many lives we're responsible for.
One of the coolest things you get to see when you're up front operating as an engineer is you'll get the best views. If there's a 4th of July, you'll see all the fireworks up and down the Hudson. You'll see eagles fly in and dip in and grab fish and fly right next to your cab.
It's cool to run the Yankees trains, especially when they win. See all those Yankee fans out there, to be able to bring them to and from the games. To just be operating the train through Harlem, to look on both sides and see the buildings and everything, it's just a great scene.
Knowing that my work is essential to keeping this city moving is a sense of great pride. It gives me great satisfaction knowing that I'm getting thousands of people to their destination safely, and they're relying on me to get to work.
I'm an engineer, and I run trains as an essential employee, moving essential employees. Through the pandemic, to be able to bring doctors and food workers, for us to be able to get them to and from their jobs safely, take a great sense of pride in being able to do that.
I take pride in my job now, and I really enjoy it. I am glad I became an engineer.
It's an amazing job. You know, it's a lot of responsibility. But at the end of the day, when I go home, you know, I'm happy with what I've done for the day at work. I know that I have a great job to come to, and I'm grateful for it.
My name is Winnie Espada. I'm a car appearance maintainer, and I've been doing this job for 10 years. I work out of Shea Yard. I was interested in helping the community, the public, so when our passengers get on the train, they'll see that I cleaned it. I'll feel good that I did the job, that they're comfortable and they don't have to worry about the mess because we took care of it.
Well, I always had a background in cleaning with janitorial work and also car detailing. So I came to the railroad and used my skills that I learned from there to help clean the trains. I like working on the train, working with the equipment. I always enjoy cleaning, so that's really it.
A typical day is thorough cleaning here in the EIC dock, where we take the seats apart, make sure the sides of the seats are clean from garbage. Any newspaper, cans that are left behind, we clean that up. Clean the windows, we take care of the doors. We make sure that the engineer's cab is clean and ready for him to go for the day.
So we take pride in making sure we sanitize everything from the bathrooms itself and everything the customer put their hands on. So, you know, it's very important to make sure we take care of our customers here. We sanitize everything.
My work is important because we have to make sure the trains are clean, especially in the times of the pandemic. We have to make sure the trains are disinfected and ready for all riders to be comfortable getting onto the train. There's a lot of anxiety going on right now with passengers and customers getting onto dirty trains. So our job is to keep everybody safe and keep everybody's head in the right place.
What does an electronic equipment maintainer do?
Paul Julian, electronic equipment maintainer. I've been in transit for 5 years. I work in the department of RSS, Radio and Security Systems. Our responsibility is to ensure that the radio system is functioning very efficiently for that provides communication to the trains. It also provides crucial and important communication for the police in the system, the EMS in the system, and the fire department in the transit system. Also, the surveillance system must be maintained. Therefore, we can have proper security and proper recording of activities in the subway system. The intrusion alarm system must also be maintained. These security systems are responsible for preventing and, if it happens, to alert any breach, whether it's the breach of a door that has sensitive equipment beyond it, or whether someone enters the tunnel beyond the platform without permission. A key motivator in what we do is to know how important communication, surveillance, and security is to New York City Transit and New York City as a whole. That gives you a sense of duty and pride in doing what we do.
What does a bus maintainer do?
My name is Perry Evel. I've been with the transit system for 8 years. I work at Casey Stengel Depot in Flushing, and I'm working as a BMB, which is a bus maintainer. My responsibilities are basically maintaining the buses, changing filters, oil, electrical, undercarriage, hydraulic system, cooling system. My main pick is brake system. We're specialized in brakes. I think our job is the most critical because if the bus don't stop, people will get hurt.
When an individual comes to New York City Transit as a maintainer, there's different training that they receive. So they'll get training on the bus from the front to the rear, electrical, diagnostics, body work, depending on what their title is.
You have to be a person that cares about your job. You have to be accurate in what you do, especially in my field, where I said, the brakes are very important. It's a safety issue. You check and you recheck, make sure that everything is done correct, and you make sure that your job is done very well. And I'm kind of a perfectionist too, so that helps.
I see our buses on the streets, picking up passengers, taking them where they need to go. Makes me feel proud knowing that they're in a safe bus.
Since I was young, I love mechanics. I never knew that this would have been my job. It's a great thing to work for the greatest city in the world and servicing millions of New Yorkers and people all over the world. It's a great privilege, and I think it's a great honor to work in this city and the biggest bus company in the world.
What does a depot bus dispatcher do?
My name is Veronica Torres. I'm a surface line dispatcher. I've been with Transit for 15 years, but I've been a dispatcher for about 6 months. Being a dispatcher is a big opportunity to broaden my experiences. I like working with people, so that also gives me an opportunity to interact with the bus operators and other people as well. From the time that the bus operators come to report, we have to make sure that they're in full uniform, that they're fit for duty. Then we also have to give them the buses to go out into service, make sure that the service is done on time, that the buses are safe and fully functional. Dispatchers that are outside on post are watching the buses, make sure that they run on time, making sure that the customers are okay, answering questions on the road, making sure safety and compliance is at 100.
We have the yard dispatchers, we have the crew dispatchers, and we have the general dispatchers. And these are all various functions. In addition to all these three functions, we also have the road dispatchers who goes out on the road to take care of the day-to-day activities on the road.
Patience and empathy make for a great dispatcher. Because I've been a bus operator for so long, I understand what it is that they do and what it entails, and I'm very empathetic to what their needs are. What we do is so important as a whole. Without the dispatchers' cohesiveness and working together, the bus operators also in unison with us, because we can't do our job without the bus operators also doing their job. So with everyone working together, it just makes for a smooth process.
Sometimes the public may call us train drivers. Honestly, it doesn't bother me because I know they don't know. My name is Keisha Cole. I'm a train operator, and I've been with MTA for 6 years. I work on the 7 line. It's approximately 21 stops from Main Street to 34th Street, and it takes about 36 minutes from end to end.
My name is Jim Van Name. I'm a train operator for New York City Transit. I've been here about 3.5 years. I operate the train on the Q line, which end to end is approximately 44 stops, and it takes me about an hour to complete.
My earliest train memory is I was a kid. I got on the F train with my mom. The first time I was on the train, I was excited. It was fun.
I was raised on Staten Island, and my friends and I used to take the Staten Island ferry over to the city, and we used to ride the train all over the place. That's probably where I got my first love of the subways.
As a train operator, there are 2 different ways you can pick up your train. You can pick up your train in the yard as a put-in, which means you okay your train for service and bring it into the terminal station, which is the last stop on the train line. Or you can actually pick it up from the terminal station. When preparing my train for service, I do various checks to make sure it's safe for myself and for the public. Once my day starts, I have about 3 round trips. I take passengers from Main Street to 34th Street and back to Main Street. That's 1 round trip.
I start over at the yard, and then I have to do what we call a put-in. I have to prep the train for service, and then they send me out over to Stillwell Terminal, and then I go into service. I do my 2 trips up to 96th Street and back, and that pretty much completes my day. It usually takes anywhere from 8 to 8.5 hours. At the end of the day, the 2 ways of finishing the job is to just walk off the train at the terminal station at the last stop and just sign out and go home, or to do a layup, take the train from the terminal station back to the yard, lay it up, put it away for the evening, and go home from there.
I love the fact that I'm moving this big machine by myself. There have been times when I'm operating the train and I think that this is the greatest job ever. The things that I get to see when I'm going down the line and I'm seeing the sun come up, it's just so beautiful.
This is my dream job. I love this job. And some of the amazing moments I see in this job is when I'm going over the Manhattan Bridge, sometimes at sunrise to see the sun coming up, or even better, sunset, to see the sun setting behind the Manhattan Bridge is quite a sight. I pinch myself that I'm in such a great job and have that opportunity to see such great things.
I enjoy transporting people from place to place. It's just a good thing. I feel like I'm doing something special.
I love trains. I love operating the trains. I love being a part of New York City Transit and knowing that I'm helping people.
Okay. Okay. While in executive session, the board discussed a litigation matter, and that was concluded. And let me now deliver my presentation for the month to the board. First of all, before I start my remarks, I want to talk about something that happened around 10 o'clock last night, which is at the 183rd Street station on the 4 train in the Bronx, the NYPD stopped a fellow who'd jumped the turnstile, and after inquiring about his ID, they detected a bulge in his clothing. Based on their training, they initiated a proper search and found a 9mm pistol, a 9mm gun. It's actually automatic with an extended magazine, 27 live rounds, 27. I was in touch with Chief Kemper, the Transit Bureau this morning, and I wanted to thank him and his team for what they do to keep our riders safe in general, but especially to deal with trying to keep people out of the system who are carrying weapons of this kind. This continues to be something that's being litigated by gun rights fanatics who think that you should be able to wander around New York and our subway system. And I appreciate the state of New York continuing to fight back on that issue, and I just want to share with the board, last year we had 50 guns like this that were taken in appropriate fare evasion enforcement settings. So in addition to everything else, I just want to underscore how important that continues to be to the safety of our system and our riders. So thank you again to our public speakers who always show up to remind us of important issues on their minds and on the broader public's minds. I'm going to talk a little bit about where we are as we enter 2020-24. It has been a busy few weeks of the beginning of the year. Last Wednesday, I testified before both the Senate and the Assembly in Albany on where we are on the budget front. And everybody knows this story at this point. MTA's financial plan, and it's a good one, MTA's financial plan projects 5 years of balanced operating budgets, even with significant service increases on the subways and on the commuter railroads, thanks to the historic investments at the state level initiated by Governor Hochul, and also some strategic belt tightening here at the MTA, not to be overlooked. As part of that budget deal, the MTA was required to achieve $400 million in cost-saving efficiency starting this year. Well, we exceeded that goal and are now on track to save $500 million by 2025, all without layoffs or service increases. And here is the kicker. All of you are part of this enterprise, and we ought to spread the word. In real inflation-adjusted dollars, the MTA budget has actually gone down by 3% since 2019. I'll say it again. We're providing a ton more service, 11 subway lines, Rich talks about it all the time, 40% more service in the Long Island Railroad, in addition to operating the Grand Central Madison, that mega terminal. And we are preparing, and it's provided for in the financial plan, to expand bus service as we implement these borough-by-borough bus redesign. So with all that extra service, we are still spending 3% less than before COVID. This is, I'm very proud of this, and I think you all should be proud of that, how we have emerged from the financial crisis brought on by COVID. This is one of the many examples that confirms that this is a new MTA, and we're delivering real results. Now, you can read all about accomplishments in the just released 2023 annual report, which is also available online. There's a QR code there for those, but I'm going to give you just a few highlights. At the new MTA, subway service is the best it's been in a decade. The commuter railroads are averaging 96% on-time performance. Long Island Railroad is running another 300 additional trains per week a day. That's the 40% service increase I always mention. I also frequently mention that is as many trains. Just what we've added in the last year is as many trains as New Jersey Transit runs into Penn every day. This is a whole new service that by itself is like the fourth or fifth largest commuter railroad in the United States, and we did it in 1 year, and we're delivering it. Service is so good that the Las Vegas Golden Knights hockey team took the train to the UBS Arena to play the Islanders from Manhattan. Pretty cool. Even the NHL is getting ahead of congestion pricing. Best of all, I know we hear from our community leaders in the disability world, and they remind us what we still have to do, but I just got to mention the facts. Paratransit, 92% on-time performance, so good that we have been tightening the window, what we consider on-time performance, 20% ridership growth, and 79% customer satisfaction. 79%, wow. And we're doing it all, this expansion and improvement, while keeping down costs. Obviously, last year, thanks to the governor and the legislature, the fare increases were limited to 4%, but we've also slashed the cost of railroad trips within New York City on City Ticket, and we've kept monthly passes on the commuter rails below pre-COVID levels. I know this is important to our Long Island Railroad and Metro North commuters, folks who have really started to come back as the city has revived. On the subways and buses, we're making free rides automatic with Tap and Go Omni, expanding to serve more New Yorkers while continuing to sign up more low-income customers for the half-price Fair Fares program. Thank you, David Jones, for continuing to be our conscience on that issue. One factor driving MTA's success has been a commitment to innovation. Let's celebrate innovation, trying new stuff. Customer service. Working with the union, the TWU, we brought station agents out of the booth for the first time. We also opened new customer service centers citywide. I think we're up to 14, Rich. No more being forced to trek to Stone Street for routine transactions like trading in an expired Metro card, which was ridiculous. And thanks to the work of Shanifa Riaria, now our permanent Chief Customer Officer, and her team, riders have a ton more information available at their fingertips. As of July, customers can sign up for real-time personalized service alerts about their specific lines and bus routes. And there's also the Weekender newsletter. I don't know how many folks are on the board are getting it, but that is what gives a ton of information so you know where the outages are and how services impact. You don't have to rely just on the posters that historically have been placed in the stations. A huge improvement. And last summer, we began testing a new version of the MTA's all-in-one mobile app. And My MTA app. So we're improving that as well so that it's up to the standard, the great standard hit by the Train Time app as well. And everybody knows about the importance of weekend outages to the capital program, but until Rich Davies showed up at Transit, there wasn't any history of using those same outages to perform operating budget funded maintenance work. That is the concept behind the amazingly successful Renuvation program, where we're doing these huge projects over a weekend to really dress up, clean, scrub down, repair surfaces, tiles, stairs, employee spaces, which are a big piece of it. We want our employees to have better spaces. Renuvations, 63 stations so far, and another 50 planned for 2024. Way to go, Transit. Brings us to platform safety, which has been another major topic of discussion for a long time, especially since the tragic death, the murder 2 years ago of Michelle Alyssa Go. In the aftermath of that tragedy, I impaneled a trespassing task force at MTA. The report detailed how most of the time when people get on the tracks, God forbid, it's voluntary, but we included nevertheless a wide-ranging list of recommendations to keep people off the tracks and to make customers feel safer. Platform screen doors are one solution, and we're trying them out at several stations. We have a procurement underway, obviously subject to the funding dramas brought on by the congestion pricing litigation. But we know already that these high-tech systems, which were designed for modern facilities and are hard to retrofit on our system, that they would take a long time, and that for the vast majority of stations, they simply cannot be accommodated because of the structure of our old platforms. So we're pursuing some other practical, cost-effective strategies, including installation of those platform fences. I think we're trying to put out, those are over there on display by the speaker's podium for folks to take a look at. Simple. And I went last night, looked at, they've been installed at Clark Street in addition to 191st Street. We're going to be trying them out at West 8th and Coney Island. This is both to increase safety. It does not absolutely prevent people getting on the tracks because you have to keep space for the doors to open and people to get on and off the trains. But it does provide a regular customer with additional sense of safety, and they can position themselves in an area where they would not be subject to risk. The folks we see hanging onto the walls at our stations will appreciate this, I believe. Fare evasion is another difficult challenge that calls for some innovation. As the Blue Ribbon panel on fare evasion that I impaneled, a couple of years ago, said in its report, we have to harden the physical barriers to fare evasion by updating our fare control infrastructure. It's going to take a long time to both select the right system to design it properly for the MTA, and then to install it is going to take time and money. In the meantime, we're trying out all kinds of stuff. One was the wide-aisle gates that were installed at Sutphin Archer. Those were primarily intended to deal with the fact that people coming off the air train are pulling bags. And what was happening is the gate was being opened constantly, and that was enabling a huge fare evasion. Now, those particular models have come in for some criticism, not unjustifiably. Changes are being made. But even with these new hacks that have broken out, to our sometimes embarrassment, but even so, revenue was up 20% just from not having the gate open as frequently, even before we sent the MTA cops over to keep an eye on it. So innovation works. We're going to keep experimenting with new types of fare gates, so in part so that we are smarter as we select and design something for the MTA system in a bigger way. To tackle fare evasion on the railroads, we started trying something new at Penn Station. Rob, well done. Checking Long Island Railroad tickets at a checkpoint before boarding. It doesn't cover everybody who gets on a train, but for a lot of the cars, people are pre-checked. That allows, Vinny, I know your team seems to appreciate the fact that it allows them to get through the train more quickly, and it is helping us to discourage fare evasion in certain circumstances, and we're testing it out. And on buses, don't forget, we've been redrawing the service map from scratch with our borough-by-borough bus redesigns, and we piloted the open stroller program to make riding a bus with small children a little easier. This was a passion project for some of our public speakers a year ago. Listen, the commitment to innovation and to efficiency is also reflected by our work on the capital side. Credit to C&D under Jamie. We are executing projects on budget and on schedule more than ever before. I'm not going to stop saying this. It's time to stop talking about the budget problems of East Side Access and other projects begun 3 to 4 governors ago, when George Pataki and Al D'Amato ruled the roost, and to start judging the MTA by what it's done in recent years, especially during COVID, but again, during the recent implementation of the capital program. The third track project, $100 million under budget. The complex L-Train project, finished 3 months early, $100 million under budget again, no shutdown required. Thanks in part to C&D's innovative project bundling and us getting better at managing all the elevator jobs. We've opened 25 ADA projects in the last 3 years, including 3 this month alone, with $250 million in savings versus cost estimates, heading in the right direction on that. And the Penn Station Concourse, a $700 million project. There is nowhere more complicated to work than Penn, not just because it's all old infrastructure. Most of the structure and even the mechanical systems are left over from before the garden was built. But you also have to get a permit from Amtrak every day, Need I say more? And yet on time, on budget. And just last week, we awarded the first contract for Second Avenue Subway Phase 2. Already C&D has squeezed $1.3 billion out of the cost, and we're still looking for more savings. Even Grand Central Madison, the poster child of screwed up projects that the world gave up on, got turned around, and the terminal's been open for a year. Customers are loving it. 17 million people since it opened, more riders than the entire Chicago commuter rail system. I mean, this is big stuff. So congestion, the next thing is that we're going to be implementing congestion pricing, obviously, and I've got somewhere a piece of paper with some more remarks about that as well, which seem to have disappeared. Do you have that? That'd be great. Always great. I don't want to go off the cuff on congestion pricing. Paige Graves says. Thank you. Thanks. I think that this is the reason I wanted to mention it in this connection is I think when you're talking about innovation, congestion pricing, where we're leading the United States, is maybe our greatest innovation yet. We've done what's necessary to prepare for it, significantly increasing subway service, Long Island Railroad service, adding accessible subway stations, improving paratransit. The tolling infrastructure has mostly been installed, and we're hoping and expecting we're going to be able to implement it sometime in the spring, barring additional interference from our neighbors in New Jersey and some other pro-traffic litigants. If there are delays to congestion pricing, it's going to push back the schedules of important ADA projects. I am passionate about the A-train signaling. The folks who come from Far Rock and through central Brooklyn, there's no reason that Phil Murphy, who's not on the ballot in Brownsville, should decide whether the folks get A-train service that is as fast and reliable and frequent as the L-train services. That's what's at stake in this. Is a $2 billion project that's on hold right now, and there are going to be other projects that are put on hold. Zero emissions buses, accessibility projects. We got 20 odd accessibility projects that are at risk because of this. So I think folks know where I'm coming from on this. New York needs better transit now. We need less traffic. Today, for example, we just got the mayor's management report. Police response time, fire truck response times, EMS response times, up again. Traffic. We need less traffic, safer streets, and cleaner air, and we don't need frivolous lawsuits. So let's get it going. With that, I'm going to ask, bring that to a close and ask for an approval of, no, Jamie, you're going to do the presentation on resiliency. The presentation we're going to hear today, I think, is super important. It goes to what probably the big novelty in the next capital program, which is, are we going to attack the issue of climate change and its impact on the system, which is coming at us very, very fast. So let me turn it over to Jamie and his team to update you on that right now.
Thank you. Thanks, Chair. Good morning, everyone. So, as you know, as Jano said, this is an existential problem for the future of our transit system and our city. We created a climate planning division last year, led by Eric Wilson, who's delivering the presentation today. I just want to introduce it. For context, last year on Earth Day, we made the MTA's commitment to achieve an 85% reduction in our greenhouse gas emissions by 2040. This is now the other side of this problem, the adaptation, recognizing that even though we're more than doing our part, we're still going to see, and we already are seeing, the impacts of climate change in our system, and we need to find ways to be prepared for them. So where are we? We started with the 20-year needs assessment that we released in October, which highlighted the existential threat of climate change to our system. Now we're in the plan development phase, moving from that needs assessment to the next 5-year capital program in the fall of this year. And Eric and his team have been continuing to do a deep dive to understand what our vulnerabilities are, not just to one climate hazard, but to all of them. That's a really important shift that we've made, and what we can do about them. That's a really critical input to the 5-year plan we're preparing for the fall. It's a daunting problem, but we're doing a few things, and we need to keep a few things in mind. First, we're moving wherever we can. As Eric will show you, as it relates to subway station flooding and other major risks that cause disruptions to our system, we are acting in every way we can. So things are already moving. But secondly, we're doing the planning work so that we can integrate resilience into everything that we do, rather than treat it as a separate expense. If we just look at ripping everything out of our system and replacing it with assets that are resilient to future climate change risks, we're not going to be able to afford to do that. But if we plan and integrate it into future plans, then we're going to be able to do that in an affordable way and upgrade and improve our system just as we're making it more resilient. So this is the lead up to, in March, we'll release a full climate resilience roadmap. Eric is going to set the stage, frame the problem, provide an overview of the recommendations, and we wanted to take the opportunity today to provide the board with a preview and get your comments and feedback. Over to you, Eric.
Thanks, Jamie, for the introduction. And good morning, board members. So just to be clear, we're defining climate resilience as the ability for our systems and infrastructure to withstand the multiple impacts of climate change that are already underway and unfortunately cannot be reversed, just to set that context. So with that, I do want to start with some good news. Our system is unquestionably more resilient than it was in October 2012, when the New York region was hit by the largest coastal storm it ever experienced. Since the catastrophic impacts of Superstorm Sandy, the MTA has installed a massive coastal surge protection system consisting of nearly 4,000 individual elements under a $7.6 billion repair program in partnership with the federal government. Particularly impressive was the effort to retrofit our systems that were originally constructed for climate conditions of the early 20th century. These protections undoubtedly make MTA's system much more prepared for the next severe coastal storm. But the fact is that climate change is underway due to global warming caused by carbon emissions, and we're tracking the 4 main climate impacts that will occur in our region. For these forecasts, we rely on climate projections provided by the New York City Panel on Climate Change, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, and other public vetted sources to assemble data across the MTA service territory. What these sources are telling us that within the New York City metro region between now and the 2050s, we can anticipate a 3-fold increase in the likelihood of potentially catastrophic coastal floods, sea level rise causing average monthly high tides up to 30 inches higher than today, twice the number of torrential rainfall days that we currently experience, and we generally define these as rainfall events with an intensity of more than 1 inch of rainfall per hour, and 3 times the number of high heat days above 90 degrees between now and the 2050s. So taking these vulnerabilities into account, we set off on the climate resilience roadmap, starting with an assessment of current and future climate vulnerabilities, and we map these to our system and assets. We've also developed 10 climate resilience strategies and an implementation framework to advance these. And as Jamie said, these are going to involve multiple different strategies to advance these, or multiple different actions to advance these strategies. So I want to give you a little bit of background on our climate vulnerability assessment. It consists of 3 main components. I spoke a little bit about the climate hazard projections. These are sea level rise, coastal surge, torrential rainfall, and temperature extremes. These projections from current day all the way up to the 2080s. We combine these with detailed maps of our system and assets, and took a look at assets that do have a level of vulnerability to climate extremes. And we took into account the protections that we've already installed, those especially since Sandy in 2012, but also others for torrential rain from rainfalls back in 2007. And that's how we, in general, identified climate vulnerability and risk exposure that we used in the climate resilience roadmap. So the next series of slides are going to take you through some highlights of impacts of the climate vulnerability assessment. So I'll go through one by one in terms of assets and risks, starting off with underground subway infrastructure. 63% of our subway system is underground and is therefore vulnerable to torrential rainfall events at intensities greater than 1.75 inches per hour. And this is the threshold at which the New York City sewer system reaches its capacity. At this point, we risk volumes of water that start to collect in the street, overtop sidewalks, and run down into lower areas, including the subway system. When service impacts start to occur, as illustrated on the picture in the right, when the amount of rain entering the system is higher than the ability of our hydraulic infrastructure to be able to pump it out, or the city sewer is blocked and it cannot be pumped out, service impacts start to occur when water collects on track and starts to approach the third rail. We have to shut down the system at that point for safety concerns. Subway yards are also a critical part of the system, and multiple subway yards benefited from coastal surge protections that were installed after Sandy, most notably the large perimeter fences around 207th Street and Coney Island Yard that are a very visible aspect of those protections. But we have identified 7 yards, in addition to the ones that have already been protected, 7 that still do need protection for coastal surge and are also vulnerable to torrential rainfall events. This is Westchester Yard in the photo on the right is an example of this, which experienced torrential rainfall flooding during Ophelia in September of last year. And exposure in coastal yards does grow over time with sea level rise. Bus depots also have a level of vulnerability. There were several bus depots that received surge mitigations after Sandy. These are shown in yellow on the map, but we have identified 14 others that still have unmitigated risks to coastal surge. And bus depots are also vulnerable during torrential rainfall events. This picture of Jackie Gleason Depot, this is from Ida in September of 2021, really shows how stormwater runoff from city streets and the surrounding environment penetrated into the depot and affected operations within. And city street flooding not only impacts static assets, it impacts operations of B&T and buses as well. And we've identified, all tunnel and most bridge approaches have a vulnerability to flooding during torrential rainfall events. This is because they're often in coastal areas. During torrential rainfall events, drainage backs up and it starts to collect in the roads serving bridge and tunnel infrastructure. We've also mapped out all of our bus routes and found that 95% of our bus routes cross a street or intersection that may be vulnerable to stormwater flooding during a torrential rainfall event. Of course, flooding isn't the only climate vulnerability that we're taking a look at. Heat as well. We looked at underground and outdoor locations. Of course, in the subway, the effects of extreme heat above 90 degrees for a prolonged period of time are palatable. Their customers experience extreme heat while waiting on the platforms when there's hot, heavy, humid air that collects in the platforms. But heat also affects underground infrastructure. The picture on the left shows communications equipment that's in the Wall Street station. This equipment must be cooled in order to keep it functional during high heat events. And there's other examples of sensitive equipment in underground locations as well. In outdoor locations during extreme heat events, metallic elements can they can expand due to heat during prolonged periods. The photo on the right shows what's called a kinked rail. It's a bend in the rail track that occurs during high heat events. This was on the New Haven line in 2017 during a summertime high heat event. It caused a system shutdown because this creates a clear safety issue. And this is, not only tracks, but it impacts other metallic equipment outdoors as well. Okay, shifting to regional railroads, looking at tracks and yards. Of course, regional railroads are also experiencing the brunt of increased exposure to torrential rainfall events. The locations that are highlighted in red on the map on the left experienced stormwater floods during one or more recent torrential rainfall events. This includes a portion of the Hudson Line, Harlem lines for Metro North, and the Port Washington and Long Beach branches at Long Island Railroad. The photo on the right shows Great Neck Station on the Port Washington branch experiencing flooding. This is from an adjacent sidewalk curb cut where floods from the streets overtopped the sidewalk and started to flow into the station at Great Neck. And then we've also looked at steep slope proximity along the regional railroads and found that 41% of Metro North track and 19% of Long Island Railroad track is adjacent to steep slopes or embankments. And this proximity to a sudden grade change really exacerbates vulnerability during torrential rainfall events. And you can see that in this picture of the Hudson line, where the velocity of water has become so acute that it causes track and ballast washouts in locations across the Hudson line because of its proximity to steep slopes. Over time, sea level rise presents a climate risk to railroad infrastructure along the coasts, including regional railroad and subway infrastructure. Sea level rise causes tidal flooding exposure, which is part of the cause of the flooding that's shown in these two photos from the Hudson line and the Long Beach branch. The red lines, or the red dots on the map, illustrate locations that may be exposed to monthly tidal floods during sunny days caused by sea level rise in the 2080s. These include portions of the Hudson line, New Haven line, Long Beach branch, and eastern portions of the Ronkonkoma branch. In total, about 64 miles of regional railroad tracks may be exposed to tidal floods, monthly tidal floods by the 2050s, and this increases to 175 miles by the 2080s. Subway rights-of-way are also exposed, with about 5 miles of at-grade subway track exposed by the 2080s. And we did a couple of renderings to illustrate how sea level rise and monthly high tide tidal floods impact rights-of-way. This is at the Spuyten Duyvil station, right at the confluence of the Hudson and Harlem rivers. And you see here in the 2030s, New York City Panel on Climate Change projects sea level rise of 12 inches just in the short time between now and the 2030s. And you start to see, the river, which, in this case is corrosive because it's brackish, start to creep up into the right-of-way at Spuyten Duyvil Station. But by the 2050s, with 30 inches, that's 2.5 feet of sea level rise. During monthly high tides, sunny days, we can anticipate without mitigations elevation or high tides that cover the majority of the right-of-way, not quite coming to the top of the third rail, just increasing over the right-of-way.
Just to emphasize that, this is monthly. This is the monthly high tide.
Yeah. Okay, so it's sort of a highlight of the vulnerabilities that we face and that are going to be detailed and to a greater extent in the Climate Resilience Roadmap. To act on these vulnerabilities, we propose 10 strategies to boost climate resilience. These are focused on combinations of assets and risks. I don't have time to go into all of these today. There will be more detail and all the actions behind all of these in the Climate Resilience Roadmap that we'll release in March. I'm going to give a preview of a couple of them, though. I also want to share our implementation framework because I really want to underscore that this isn't just about new capital projects. Capital projects, of course, are a key part of this multi-pronged strategy that we have to advance to become more resilient, and that's why it's first in line here with the cover of the 20-year needs, where we first started to flag some of the issues related to climate resilience. But Jamie also mentioned the importance of design practices. As we do state of good repair projects, just going forward, we need to be aware of vulnerabilities that those assets face and take steps to build in design measures, future-facing design steps to anticipate the climate of tomorrow so that they're able to withstand future impacts. And this is this practice of resilient design. This is sort of exemplified by this elevated piece of equipment on the Long Beach branch that was elevated actually as part of Sandy mitigations. Also important are operating agencies by each, or operating actions taken on behalf of each of the operating agencies. These are the proactive steps that when a storm does occur will enable the system to get back online much more quickly than it would have if they hadn't happened. In this case, it's proactive vegetation removal that could become a problem with debris in the right-of-way during an extreme wind or storm event. And then fundamentally, I also want to highlight that MTA cannot take these actions on our own. We depend on the actions of partner agencies, and property owners in some cases to help safeguard our infrastructure. Critically here in terms of subways, our partners at DEP are inspecting sewers and siphons that are adjacent to subway infrastructure to ensure that their systems can optimally act during a torrential rainfall event. Yeah, almost done. Let me just share a couple of highlights of some of the strategies, and then definitely happy to take questions. So Subway 1 is about shielding subway stations and tunnels, and this strategy consists of a couple very basic but fundamental components. It's about keeping the stormwater out and removing the stormwater that enters. And there's sort of three key elements towards implementation of this particular strategy. There's a set of capital projects. In this case, there's a simple capital project that I want to highlight, which is this extra step. This is on 4th Avenue in a chronically impacted flooding. This is a location that often experiences stormwater flood impacts. These extra steps look nominal, but they actually prevent stormwater from entering the system when it overtops the street and go into the subway. This is a really important critical measure for stormwater resilience. Operating actions, this is a picture of folks doing track drain cleaning. Clearly, we need to make sure that our track drains are free of debris and able to operate optimally during a torrential rainfall event. And then critically, interagency actions, DEP out cleaning catch basins adjacent to our infrastructure to make sure that their catch basins are able to drain, not back up and hit our subway system. So just to illustrate, there have been about in this strategy, it looks at more than just stations, but for the moment I'm going to focus on stations. And this is really about not just keeping stations dry, it's about reducing the service impacts that occur on subways during a torrential rainfall event. So there's many sort of different elements here, but focusing on stations for just a moment, about 200 stations have experienced impacts from a torrential rainfall event over recent years. We have been hard at work advancing capital projects to mitigate this exposure to stormwater. We've installed 28 protections at 28 stations after 2007 torrential rain, and we have another 74 underway. And I also want to highlight interagency actions are really important. DEP goes out to clean 16 catch basins around the system as a matter of course before every flash flood emergency declared in the city. They've also gone out and cleaned 9 siphons, about 13,000 linear feet of sewers adjacent to subways over the past couple of years. And we're going to continue coordinating with them on the big picture in terms of the capital projects, particularly in locations where their own sewer systems are undersized to serve neighborhoods as well as subway infrastructure. And then in 2023, with the heavy rainfall events, 88 stations experienced additional flooding. We're tracking all of these, and we'll be looking at a similar set of actions, a mix of capital, operating, and interagency actions as well to advance mitigations for these. Another strategy I want to highlight just briefly, this is strategy 7, switching to Metro North. For Metro North, we're looking at a few key locations. I'm highlighting here the Hudson Line and Mott Haven Yard. Of course, Hudson Line, has experienced a huge number of climate vulnerabilities and impacts recently. I included 2 photos here on the left. There's the washout that occurred at Dobbs Ferry at a culvert as a result of Ida. And then a picture of the new culvert that is sized to accommodate large volumes of water flowing underneath at Dobbs Ferry. So another example of how we use design. Obviously, we had to do this repair as quickly as possible, but the design anticipates the magnitude of future rainfall events that will be occurring in this location. In another area that's on our radar on the right is Mott Haven Yard. This is a critical area for east of Hudson service on Metro North. All three lines pass through Mott Haven Yard in the South Bronx. During this, Ophelia in September of last year, stormwater started to, you can see it up there at the signal level, really resulted in service shutdowns. And so this is on our radar for stormwater flooding. And so to wrap up, just to highlight a few next steps, we first highlighted climate resilience, and as Jamie mentioned, in our 20-year needs back in October. We're looking to release the climate resilience roadmap in March and get underway immediately and accelerate some feasibility study, but really design of key projects, all in anticipation of funding under the next capital plan, which we anticipate in the fall. So thank you very much. Look forward to your questions.
Thanks, Eric. Just in closing, I just want to emphasize, because Eric said a lot, there's a lot of vulnerability. This is a long game, but also we're taking action. So I just want to emphasize, what Eric showed, 200 subway stations, almost half were locations that were impacted in these last 4 heavy rainstorms, but we're acting. 100 of them, we have already put improvements in place, or we have things underway in this capital program. That includes, on the Upper West Side, the issue with managing water coming out of the sewer that caused a disruption during Ophelia to service, and was in fact a lot of the reason that the subway wasn't better able to support Metro North in its disruption. We're about to open bids on a project to fix that. So 100 underway. The other 88 or so, we're looking at really good partnership with the city. We have a task force we're going through. The vast majority of it we can handle either with our capital improvements in our system, or we're going around with DEP and DOT from the city or from other municipalities as well, and we're figuring out, can I clean a catch basin? Can I fix the sewer problem? So we feel good about that. We're down to about 22 where you do need larger improvements. It's really neighborhood flooding that's causing the problem. And we're working through that with the city too. We have a good dialogue going. They're doing a stormwater plan, they announced. And so we've sort of transmitted those 22. We're having a conversation, and we're hoping that we're able to address all of those. So, also Westchester Yard, Eric showed, that's going to be awarded this year, improvements to drainage in Westchester Yard. Hudson Line, we're very focused on. We're getting organized to particularly look at retaining wall issues right now, but also to look comprehensively at the Hudson Line for what we do in the next capital program and beyond that.
Okay, super presentation, thank you. So I have questions first from Hayda Haltzis. I saw Mr. Albert, Mr. Miranda, Mr. Chu.
I was trying to find the pictures. Vinny, when did we put together that task force we had? Was it last year or the year before? It was the year before. Steve, I think, put the task force together. So just a couple of things. First of all, thank you very much for this, and I'm glad to see that things are moving along. Jamie, you mentioned the task force. Do we meet on a monthly basis, bi-monthly basis? Have we, because I remember that was one of the big things, is putting together the task force and making sure that all the agencies that are, because it's not just us, we can't do it ourselves, right? So that was my first question. And two, where are we in the, as far as funding all the things that we need in the capital budget?
On funding, this is, the steps toward the 5-year program. So as I said, we do need to identify specific funds available for resiliency improvements, but really I can't emphasize enough that the reason we're doing this is every time we replace a component in the system, when we do track work, when we do pretty straightforward state of good repair work, the key is that we're integrating understanding of these vulnerabilities and how to respond to them into that work. So it's we're going to need to dedicate some funds, but really the focus is on making sure that we're thinking about it all the time. Eric, do you want to talk about how that task force with the city is going?
But Jamie, even with the simple things like doing I call the steps on top of the entranceway of the subway, that is integrated in everything else that we do, or
No, we have specific packages of stations that we awarded some at the end of last year. We're awarding packages this year to do that work. I think Eric was saying there's 74 stations underway.
Yeah, but I would also add, we are looking at ways to integrate the steps into, other, projects as well that have a vulnerability for sure. And just on the task force, we continue to meet. I've sort of taken the mantle from Stephen, and continue to meet, particularly with New York City DEP and New York City DOT. In particular with DEP, we're just out in downtown Brooklyn in December. They found a siphon that was not functioning properly. This is probably because of all the construction that's been taking place in downtown Brooklyn that caused some of the clogging issues in the siphon. So they're able to address that. And we found those kinds of engagements very beneficial in looking at tactical actions on behalf of the city.
And do you meet on is it bi-monthly? How often do you meet? Does the task force meet?
Yeah, so we have formal site visits. We actually go out, I would say, every quarter. We actually have a site visit, but there's quite a bit of correspondence between them. We either meet monthly or actually even more frequently in terms of correspondence.
All right, thank you.
Thanks. Mr. Miranda?
Thank you very much. Thank you so much for the presentation. Following on Jamie's point, Eric, I saw one of the slides, what I assume is a lot of work on the Queens Boulevard lines, that there has been infamously having problems with water. But then I saw another slide in which only one of those stations was affected by recent rain events. So that means that work, to Jamie's point, is having positive results, outcomes. Is that how we can interpret those two slides?
Yeah, I think we are monitoring, obviously, when stormwater, when torrential rainfall events occur and measuring the efficacy. And so far, those measures are holding. I should say that every rain event that hits the city is very different. There's intensities that occur in different pockets throughout the city. So for example, Ophelia was very different from Ida, just in the way that intensities were distributed across the city. So we may be experiencing sort of different physical impacts of a torrential rainfall event in different locations. But, knock on wood, those central, those Queens Boulevard stations, which had elevated steps and elevated vents, very effective measures to prevent that overtopping from the street into the subway system have held.
Mr. Albert Sammy Midori. Yeah.
Thank you for this, very illustrative of the issues that we're facing. This probably varies by storm, but are you finding that more rain is entering the subway system through the existing entrances or through the street gratings that line the streets?
I think the source of impacts is both. I think the broader vulnerability are, in general, are vent batteries. Those are those long the metal grates where ventilation occurs through the subway. Fresh air comes into the subway system. That problem becomes particularly acute when curb heights are not. They're generally supposed to be between 6 and 7 inches, and there's several locations around the city where there is insufficient curb height, and so that exacerbates the challenge of stormwater overtopping.
Okay. For instance, you showed flooding at 79th Street on the Upper West Side, and the gratings are in the Broadway malls, which are slightly raised.
Yeah.
But it's still flooded, obviously. So.
Yeah.
A lot of that, remember, Andrew, a lot of that has to do with the capacity of the city's sewer system once you get above 1 3/4 inches an hour.
Yeah.
And that's an area which has experienced it again and again. But we're making an investment to try to improve that particular area on the IRT. Right, Jamie?
Yep, you got it. Just about to open those bids. This, there's a whole bunch of things to say here. I mean, one is, we've said it before, we can't turn the subway stations into submarines. I mean, water is going to find its level. The vents are there because they're providing air, ventilation to the system. The entrances are there because people are using the entrances. Just part of that is, are we going to continue to see in these very heavy flash flood events, YouTube videos of stations with water flowing through them? Yes. What we're most concerned about is to keep the water at a level where it doesn't cause danger or risk to passengers, or where it doesn't disrupt service. So that's really what we're working towards. We're working towards that with some of the interventions that we're making, and then we need to rely on the city. Eric made a really good point. The city does a great job resurfacing streets throughout the city. Sometimes the pavement gets a little higher than it should be, which means you don't have enough curb height. So there's an opportunity to mill that down so that the water can be really held in the streets until the sewer's capacity recovers. Those are the kinds of conversations we're having with the city. I know they're thinking, Rit Agarwal and others at the city, they have great thinkers, people working on this stuff. So we're in a good dialogue and hopeful that we're able to come together in their stormwater plan with some of these improvements.
And you are looking at third-party infiltration, like from a building where the water may be coming in, obviously. And you're working with DEP.
Yes, certainly. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chu and
Well, Eric, you certainly started 2024 off to a strong special presentation season. If this was a Netflix trailer, I'd be getting excited to binge watch the whole thing in March. So I have so many questions, but I'm going to hold them until I get to see the full feature. And it would be nice, Jamie, if we could monetize some of those subway flooding videos to pay for some of this stuff, just from an innovation perspective. And a lot of focus on the conversation has been on interaction with city agencies, which I understand. There's so much, subterranean infrastructure. So my question is more high level on, and even offer, like, if there's any way to assist to, particularly on Long Island, I could speak while I'm still a Long Island representative, specifically for, coordination with the municipalities. And we have, Long Island sometimes seems like we have more municipalities than actual citizens. Some of them have very, very limited, planning capacity compared to some of the larger municipalities. And I think that this, what we've done, what you're working on, could be a tremendous resource, not just to help them consider what they have to deal with in the future, but also potentially, discuss collaboration on cost share for certain projects, efficiencies as they plan infrastructure, non-related, MTA infrastructure improvements, and even seek funding. So I'd be interested in, hearing more about that. Understandably, the city has to have a large coordination, is equipped to do it, but there are a lot of others that I think would not even be aware that this is happening.
No, I really appreciate that. This is going to be an all-hands-on-deck approach, and we are absolutely going to need the support of municipalities, property owners, innovative strategies across the entire region.
Yeah, and I will say, and Rob Free, we're in a good dialogue about this. Long Island, there are certain vulnerabilities we've identified, particularly Far Rockaway branch and Long Beach branch. The Long Island does have, some advantage when it comes to heavy rainfall being more flat. But certainly there's inundation issues at low points. There's coastal risks, and as I say, on Long Island, Long Beach is a big issue that we will need to be talking to the municipality and others about as we move forward in this, because it's certainly some of these, just because of the scale of the railroads, you can't solve these problems as in some ways as easily as we can in the compacted jurisdiction of the city.
And just to follow up on that, Jamie, it's not just, when we're thinking of our riders in a broader sense, not just their whole experience, not just when they step on and off, the railroad, it's also how they get, to their final destination. Some of these events could significantly affect, our ridership, if people cannot get to our infrastructure. So I think just, putting on like the Sim City civilization hat, right? It's like a bigger picture than just that. And this is like, you can laugh, but this is a huge issue, right? This is like, we're talking about 2080, which is, going to come faster than any of us realize. And a lot of people are still flat-footed on this.
Yeah. Thanks. Midori.
Commissioner Chu, it's great to have you on the board as our climate champion. So thank you. Thank you for that. Thank you for this presentation. My questions have to do more with how this capital expenditure ties to what happens at the points of the storms when workers are out there and we have the operating expenditures that come up due to the work that we were able to do or not able to do. Like you said, every storm weather event is significantly different. And storm weather, weather might not be the only thing that we're confronting, right? We're confronting heat impacts, we're confronting, pandemics, all of that. So I appreciated, Jamie, what you said from a success standpoint. It has to be about, we'll still have water in the system. It has to be about service and safety. So let's say it sounds like you have 100 projects in the pipeline, 80 some that you're going to work on, but a lot of this will be funded in the next capital plan, it sounds like, maybe some of the significant ones. So that's still a few years away, or, I guess we're starting that process soon. There'll be more storms during this time period. And so how are we as an agency working towards ensuring that when an event happens and transit workers have to go out there and make sure that the system is as safe as can be? One, I think Commissioner Zuckerman has brought this up before. How are we accounting for that? I know from an accounting perspective, every storm has a little label. I know we did that for Hurricane Sandy at the Port Authority. But how are we also making the case tying the capital investment to the operating expense impact? As we know here, every operating dollar is precious. We keep learning that in every fiscal crisis that we have. It is difficult to come by operating dollars. And so all of this capital investment is, I think, is supposed to help us ameliorate some of those operating expenses or maintenance expenses. But it actually sounds like whole-scale maintenance might change with this climate crisis. Like, how are we going to, if we're not able to put up the storm, walls or whatever, then workers will have to ensure that other things happen to protect the system. So how are we making those linkages from the capital investment that's made to maybe that means that there are different operating tasks that have to take place before a storm? And then how does that potentially impact our budget, knowing that it'll still take a little bit for these capital investments to be made? And so we're going to have who knows how many, we're going to have dozens of storms this year. And so how is that going to, because you've done so much good work on the $500 million, but that's real operating dollars that are going to be impacted in terms of responding to these storms.
Rich, do you want to take a crack? And I invite Kathy and Rob as well to talk about how we're planning to run in the world before we make all these investments.
Sure. I mean, so you're right. I mean, obviously we think about, at least I think about capital as a way to ensure that our operating dollars are not being wasted or otherwise being used to address issues that capital should be, right? So it's not only the asset hardening that Eric talked about, but it's also retrofitting or repairing a lot of these facilities that do have the issues. You do know that as an accounting matter, we put out storm codes for any storm, so we account for the preparation and then the response and then ultimately the wind down of any storm, whether it be water-related superstorm or certainly winter storms. We also, one other thing to think about is certainly we spend a lot of capital dollars on these assets that allow us to harden the system, and we exercise those from time to time too, right? So we are, we do not only tabletops as an agency across MTA, but I can't speak for the railroads, I'm sure they do, but we are exercising those assets from time to time to make sure that they work in preparation for a storm. So that has had an additional cost. I don't think it's been a material cost per se. I think, frankly, it's a prudent way of doing business. But I don't think we've seen an increase, a material increase in our operating costs necessarily. But as more storms occur, whatever those storms may be, they're probably in the future you're going to see more response related dollars for sure. That would be my guess. But I'll turn over to my colleagues.
Sure, I can speak to that a little bit since we saw a lot of impacts from adverse weather really all year long on Metro North. A couple things. In the run-up to a storm, absolutely, there's a lot of preparatory activities that take place to make the infrastructure as resilient as possible heading into some of those major events. So, Eric outlined, tree trimming. I mean, we do a lot of tree trimming sort of ancillary to our sort of routine maintenance, and that's very important with respect to, major wind events. But also just checking drainage before a storm, making sure that, we worked with the city on the siphon near Mott Haven to make sure that that's clear. So there is some preparatory activity that goes into effect before those storms take place. But just sort of looking back on some of the events that we had this year, we're now, through our track department, looking to elevate some of the tracks near Garrison. It's not going to be the cure-all, but it will help, I think, with respect to some of those tidal events. We have a water condition that we see periodically on the Wassaic branch. We're doing the same thing there. And then to your point and to Neil's point, we're tracking those expenditures because it is an important part of, some of our cost reduction strategies is to, look for overtime reduction opportunities. Well, when you have one of those major weather events, we have a lot of overtime that we expend restoring the service through those areas. So some of the prophylactic activities on the front end will enable us to be able to continue to manage those labor costs.
And Kathy, and I think the question is more like we're wholesale rethinking how to ensure that resiliency is core as part of our capital planning process. I think that's excellent, and I commend your leadership, Jamie, on that. I guess my question is, what are we doing on the operating side that kind of mirrors that, and do we need to, that whole-scale rethinking about what our operating procedures look like as it relates to the fact that these conditions will get much more difficult on an event basis, but on a daily basis as, there are thousands of workers out there making the system run. And how does kind of the climate impact create, or does it change how we daily think about maintenance, how we daily think about this, or is it just a capital investment strategy?
I don't know. From my perspective, the majority's got to be both. I mean, I think it's got to be both. And, I think, we really value the strong partnership with Jamie's team, with Eric's team, specifically in terms of identifying the assets that need to be hardened. I think one of the challenges, for all of us is that the story is being written in real time. If you had spoken to me 3 years ago with respect to the area of greatest vulnerability on the Metro North system, I would have told you the Harlem line. We see flooding up, Chappaqua, up on the Harlem line all the time, right? So that would, and in the Bronx too, down like Melrose, Tremont, that area, in addition to Mott Haven, I would have told you the Harlem line. And then this year was the year that it really, really kind of hit home the extent of the vulnerability on the Hudson line. So the challenge is it's an evolving story as these, effects become more pronounced and more frequent. I think, the operation as well as the capital planning folks are going to have to respond and be nimble with respect to what we're seeing out there.
I just want to add, I think you're raising a really important issue, and obviously we're trying to get ahead of it because we have a capital plan coming up, and this is going to be a topic. We are starting to talk about board staff working committees on the capital plan, and this is going to be part of it. But the important point, a lot of the important point, is what Jamie said, which is now we're in the core strategy has to be integrated into state of good repair. What Kathy's talking about, track adjustments and so on. We have to start to integrate this into everything we do. And you're not wrong, Midori. I especially want folks who are going to be, in the legislature and otherwise, who are going to have an impact on the capital plan to see some of the back of house rooms in our subway system. It's not just about the flooding and, the water cascading down the stairs, which is actually something more manageable. But when heat hits these frequently antiquated, comm systems, if you go to that Wall Street comms room, which I've been to, I mean, this is old. These are old systems to begin with. You're not cooling them. We're at risk, and those have other consequences, not just shutting down the subway system, but our ability to communicate and do safety-related comms. So,
Yeah.
so we're trying to educate the world about all the different aspects about it, educate ourselves, and it's going to be a factor in our discussions about the next capital plan.
And if I may, I think that's great. You're getting ahead of, what the next capital plan is going to look like. I think my focus on operations comes from, given that there's that emphasis on the capital plan and that we're going to need investment for it. My worry is we've done all this good work on the operating budget. What happens when we're like, oh, wow, we might need a lot more money to keep this system operating at the level that we in ridership expect, given the impacts of climate, and that's and we know firsthand how hard it is to come by operating
So
dollars.
far, we are managing it through appropriate use of overtime, as Kathy says, but it's a very strong point and one that we have to follow up on. Other comments that or questions on this topic? I think we got a lot of work to do together as we take on the capital plan and Midori's point about how it affects operating budget as well. I neglected to invite comments on all of the issues that I discussed, and Neil, you said you wanted to say something.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and kudos to you for this team you've assembled. I feel with the climate situation, whether we're talking about the budgeting situation, which I've mentioned many times in various committees, or our actual technical approach. Eric, your presentation was great, and we've got a good team to solve the problem. But obviously, we're just a bit player God, and forces of nature are working a bit against us there. Anyway, on your remarks earlier, I wanted to pick up one topic. In the last couple of weeks, New Jersey announced a massive, what I would call a fare hike. When you hit double digits, that's a hike. We don't do hikes. We do increases, and modest ones at that. But if you look at the budget we passed last year, the fare increase we did generates every year $200 million of incremental revenue, right? $200 million a year. That's nice, but fare evasion is 3 times the size and growing and growing. And you can listen to the comments of my fellow board members when we sit in the room here before we come out here, and the amount of grousing about observations in the subway, less so in the commuter rails, obviously on buses, is intense. And to quote one of my colleagues, I won't say who said it, but it's not just kids jumping over for fun. It's men in suits and women in dresses. People are doing it as almost a matter of course. And I tell you, it's a real problem in this city. It's a real problem in this region. For 5 out of the last 6 months, if you look at paid ridership, it's actually gone down against the forecast that we have. Revenue's up, but paid ridership's down. That tells me that people are not paying attention to this really serious problem. And for us to avoid, God, I hope we avoid a fare hike like New Jersey, because that's not what we want to do. But if that $600 million keeps creeping up, if we don't pay the fare, if we don't do what we're supposed to do as citizens of this region, just do what you're supposed to do, pay the fare, because ultimately you're not going to see a 4% increase. Probably not under your tenure, sir, but maybe future chairs and CEOs will see 15%, because if we can't control the fare evasion, then we're going to have to find a way to charge the people who actually do pay it.
Strong views on this. I just wanted to, the MTA, we highlighted this issue 2 years ago. We formed this blue ribbon panel to talk about this issue when it was starting to be apparent right after as we moved out of the pandemic. And this is a fundamental existential threat to our ability to provide first-class public transit and make it better, more frequent, more reliable. And so we got to push back. We're going to keep doing it in all different kinds of ways. There's going to be experimentation along the way. Some things will succeed more than others. But Rich and his team are spending a ton of time on it. Rob has been innovative with trying to look at how do we make the fare collection faster and more efficient for our workforce on the commuter rails, and we're going to keep at it. David?
Yeah, I'm just wondering, it sort of triggered it. Are we going to have a report on the free bus program that
I was
initiated?
asked about that at the budget hearing, and the law says a 6 to 12 month experiment and report back to the legislature and the public. So we're not into that period yet. So we're going to be continuing this experiment for another at least another few months and collecting the data that will allow us to give both the board and the legislature and the public feedback on how it's gone. Other questions or comments before we move on to our more routine business? Okay. Thank you, everybody, and again, thanks again to the C&D team for that presentation. As everybody knows, we do a ton of our the substantive business of this board on Monday on the committees, and this is where we affirm that work and go over it as a full board. The minutes of the December board meeting have been, and of each committee have been distributed to all the members. Are there any corrections or omissions? Mr. Alpern?
Sure. You haven't heard from me in a few months, but I have 3 today. On page 5, in the center, it says Chair Lieber called to order the November 2023. It should be the December 2023. On page 6, Jack Connors of the PCAC's name is spelled incorrectly. It's ORS, not ERS. And on page 7, second paragraph from the bottom, Chair Lieber stated that not only are New Yorkers and tourists, it should be tourists. There's more than one. Other than that, that's it.
Okay. All right. And if there are no other corrections or omissions, the minutes are approved as distributed. Bridges and tunnels. Who is Mr. Miranda? Will you speak for that?
Thank you, Chair Lieber. The Bridges and Tunnel Committee met Monday and reports the following. There is one procurement item for board approval for $38.9 million. The committee recommends this item, and I move it.
Second. Mr. Jones. All in favor? Any
Aye.
opposition or abstention? The item carries.
This concludes the Bridges and Tunnels report.
Okay. Audit Committee, Ms. Barbas.
Good morning, Chair. The Audit Committee met Monday, and there is one item for board approval. On Monday, the MTA's independent auditor presented MTA third quarter 2023 financial statements. Today, we are seeking board approval of the financial statements. The committee recommends the item, and I move it.
Second. Thank you. Mr. Fleischer. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposition or abstention? The item is approved. Staying with Ms. Barbas for the capital program report. Thank you.
The Capital Program Committee met on Monday and reports the following. Construction and Development has 2 actions for a total amount of $3.3 million. The first item is a request for an authorizing resolution to issue a competitive request for proposals, and the second is a ratification of a modification related to the Penn Station reconstruction project. The committee recommends these items, and I move them.
May I have a second? Ms. Soren. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposition or abstention? The item carries.
This concludes the Capital Program Committee report.
Mr. Chu, would you give us a joint railroad report?
Chairman, the Joint Railroad Committee met on Monday, and we have no matters for the full board to vote on this time.
Thank you. Ms. Mahaltzis, the Transit Committee.
The Transit Committee met on Monday and reports the following. There was one item at the estimated amount of $75.4 million. One procurement item. We've got the word procurement. The committee recommends this item, and I move it.
Is there a second? Ms. Midori Valdivia. All in favor? Any opposition or abstention? The item carries. Ms. Mahaltzis?
Oh, this concludes the New York City Transit Committee report.
All right. Mr. Zuckerman, the Finance Committee.
Thank you, sir. The Finance Committee met Monday afternoon, reports the following. There are no actions for board approval. There are, however, 3 procurement items. 2 are competitive, and 1 is a modification for a total of $63.3 million. The committee recommends these items, and I move them. Thank you. Second.
Second.
Sammy.
Sammy, you got the second.
Any discussion?
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposition or abstention? The items carry.
All right, thank you. There are 2 real estate actions items this month. One is an administrative item for Metro North, and 1 is a transactional item for Long Island Railroad. The committee recommends these items, and I move them.
Second. Mr. Miranda. Any, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposition or abstention? The items carry.
This concludes the Finance Committee report.
Okay. Before we adjourn, I have one other item of business. There are 2 amazing colleagues who are departing the MTA this week, and they're standing right behind me. Today is the last board meeting for MTA PD Sergeants Willie Barretto and Hank Mychik. Both have worked on the 20th floor for many years, and they've been a regular presence in the background of these board meetings. I know everyone's used to seeing them standing at attention. They bring to everything they do an incredibly high level of professionalism, and also, as they put up with all of us, tremendous good humor. And they keep all of us safe, and we have been honored to have partners like this. I've gotten to know Willie and Hank well, and we wish them Godspeed on the next chapter of their lives. They are both amazing human beings and have contributed enormously to the MTA and to the safety of the New York region. So thank you both. On that positive note, I'll take a motion to adjourn. Second, we stand at adjournment. Thank you, everybody.
Do we have replacements, John?
on that audio. Lieber.
So, pretty exciting present. I thought the amazing presentation today. We talked at the outset about a lot of the things that have been accomplished and the innovation that's led us to this point where we're in solid shape for the time being economically. But the climate change issue, where I think the MTA is really being a leader, I found that presentation incredibly informative and inspiring. In part because we're really charting out where, the challenges that are in front of us. After Sandy, people tended to focus on coastal surge. I think that we're really showing the impacts of torrential rainfall, sea level rise, potential impacts from extreme heat. And we are already taking action. I thought the point that Jamie Torres-Springer made at the end was really important, which is of the 200 stations that have had serious water impacts in these last few storms, we have done projects already, many of them in tandem with the City of New York, that have addressed the conditions that allowed those stations to have all that water get in. And we've gotten the number that really need some special new capital project treatment down to about 22 stations. So there's current day activity as well as pretty important long-range planning. So important meeting from that standpoint, and then we will let Mitten take over.
All right, we'll go first to Andrew Siff of WNBC. He's in the balcony today, sir. Andrew.
Very much. Two questions. One, on the climate.
Yeah.
You mentioned to the board this morning that as concerned as you are about rain, you're also concerned about heat.
Yeah.
And you gave an example of a comms room. Is your concern that the equipment would almost quite literally melt? Or describe for us what the worry is?
The worry is that, listen, riders experience extreme heat in our stations when they're on platforms, so they know about it. Our riders get it. But the other impact, which you don't always see, is in these back-of-house areas, you have comms rooms, communications rooms, and other sensitive infrastructure that is now being subjected to extreme heat. Now, we have to invest in modernizing those systems, but also making sure that they're adequately ventilated, they're cooling systems, and all of that needs to be updated even faster in light of these extreme heat conditions. You can see that especially at that Wall Street station.
Now, on the issue of fare evasion, real quick, you described it, and you've done this before, as an existential threat. And yet, you know that you have New Yorkers who have seen the, by now, viral video of people walking through these beta-tested turnstiles at Sutphin Boulevard, for example. So when you describe it as an existential threat, and you have New Yorkers watching people basically walk into the system free, they might conclude, well, they're not acting like it's an existential threat.
Andrew, that's not fair. I mean, if you look at what we have been doing, we've developed a new mechanism to stop backcocking. All the different ways that people do fare evasion, stop backcocking. We have these fins that we're experimenting with, and there's a lot of experimentation going on, trying to make the barrier a little bit higher, even with our existing system. We're changing the keys on all of the exit doors. And we've also, as you have reported, added, trying to discourage people from popping open the exit gate, which they're not supposed to do, not to pop it open other than in an emergency. So we're experimenting with many different ways, even as we're planning for a brand new state-of-the-art fare control system. The Sutphin Boulevard experiment, I wanted to add two things. One is it was principally focused on creating a new wide outgate so people would be able to roll bags at that AirTrain linked station. People are coming from JFK, they need to get bags in. Even with the shortcomings of that new experimental fare array, fare evasion was down 20%. We were collecting more fares. So that's important. And two is we are making changes to that to address these obvious shortcomings of that. So judge us in the long run by all of the different things that we are doing to try to push back on fare evasion. Remember, there was the MTA who 2 years ago said fare evasion is an existential crisis. I created a special commission to come up with ideas. We're executing on those ideas one by one.
And moving across the balcony, that's Elijah Westbrook right there from CBS 2.
Elijah.
Good afternoon, Jano. So my two questions pertain to this looming G train shutdown this summer to make way for CBTC. Of course, there's no secret at this point that people have some fears that this could resemble something similar to what we saw with the L train shutdown a few years ago.
Which didn't happen, right?
Which, well, you know, there were some inconveniences that were there.
Didn't happen, right?
Well,
okay. So just click.
I guess you could talk to the riders about that. But,
Yeah.
you know, my question here is, anything that was learned from that project that could ease some of the concerns about this project coming up this summer?
Yeah, it's a good question. So what we learned from that project are two things. One is, wherever possible, try to maintain some connection service, especially where the issue is, are people going to be able to get over the water, to get under a river? And we were able, through some maximum innovation, to preserve that in the L train project. Came in 3 months early, $100 million under budget. So we did learn something. In this case, what we've also learned is that a quality bus shuttle system can work in Greenpoint, because we did it 10 years ago. In this case, it's very different because we don't have the option of turning the work on and off in short periods of time, because the track work is so complicated in terms of configuration that you have to tear up the whole track. It's not just a matter of relaying a few ties and then putting it all back together again. That's why we need the 6-week shutdown. Good news for Greenpointers, who are great transit users. It's going to be 6 weeks at the height of vacation season in the summer. I think that is way better than 50, 60, 70, 80 weekends in a row of shutdown. We're looking after our riders.
And my follow-up to that is, are there any plans in place to potentially rehabilitate some of the stations along that line while service is being shut down?
Jamie, you're welcome. Rich, you're welcome to come in and talk about that. We always take advantage of shutdowns to improve station. That's our famous renovation program.
Exactly. So we're looking at the stations to see if they could be part of our renovation project. We'll work closely with C&D to be able to accommodate that. They need track, obviously, space to ensure the CBTC is working. But the short answer is, yeah, we're going to look at some of those stations to see. A thing, Jano's challenged us to do is, again, when we're doing all this track and signal work, what do our customers do when they come back on Monday morning? And we want to give them, we hope, a brighter, cleaner station. We're going to do it.
All right, next up is Nolan Hicks from the New York Post, America's newspaper. Nolan, good afternoon.
Some portion of America's newspaper.
Well, thanks for the new slogan. I'm sure the marketing guys have put a check in the mail. On the question of fare evasion and of these new gates, I want you to react to what somebody put this tweet out there. It went viral. It's sort of an incendiary thing, but it got people talking. So this is quoting, if it kept costs down for the Triangle Shirt Waste Factory, it can keep costs down for the MTA. So do you want to talk a little bit about making it harder to get out of the station in terms of an emergency, which is effectively what you're doing to try to recoup some lost fare?
No, Nolan, I actually know the history you're talking about. I'm going to pass it over. It's not funny and it's not relevant. You're making light of a tragedy in New York's history. But what's being done on to experiment with how to get people not to use the exit gate, which is the superhighway of fare evasion. We're trying to close down the superhighway of fare evasion. We've gotten approval from the code authorities, the fire experts on how to do that, and we're going to do it because we're not letting New Yorkers who walk up to the turnstile and pay their fare and look over at somebody who has their Metro card in their hand and their Omni open on their phone decide that they're going to go for the gate because it's open. We're trying to discourage the illegal and improper opening of the gate. We love our riders. We're just trying to get them to follow the rules and not open the gate. That's why there's going to be a 15-second delay as an experiment.
How will riders know that there's a 15-second delay on those doors?
They will find out very quickly because the vast majority of New Yorkers use the same stations again and again, and they will be discouraged from hitting the exit gate, which they're not supposed to use, when it doesn't open for a little while.
Will there be a sign that says you must hold down for 10 seconds in order to get it to engage?
No, there's a sign already. It says, do not use this except in an emergency. That's the one that we're trying to get people to comply with.
And we move on to Rai Rivard right there from Politico. Rai.
Hey, what's going on? A couple of lawsuits have now been filed against congestion pricing in a couple of jurisdictions. There's settlements in one. Can you help us understand, or settlement talks in one? Can you help us understand the hurdles here and whether this is going to hold up congestion pricing?
Well, listen, the bottom line is congestion pricing is not only about lawsuits or anything else. What it's about is dealing with congestion in New York City. And you know what? The mayor's management report, the preliminary version, just came out. What's in it again? Slower response times for ambulances and fire and EMS and police. And we have to deal with congestion. We're the #1 congestion city. That's why we're doing this. And if it gets held up by litigation, and we don't have control over litigation schedules, obviously, that'll be unfortunate. Because people who ride the A train deserve a train that's as fast and reliable as frequent as the L train. And we cannot put in new signals, a $2 billion project, because we don't have the certainty about when congestion pricing is going to allow us to start to collect that additional revenue. So that's the consequence of all this litigation. I don't control the litigation schedule, so I don't have an answer for you. But we are still moving forward to put ourselves in a position to implement it in the late spring, as we have said before. But I don't have an answer on all the litigation and which judge will schedule which motion practice and when they will issue decisions.
And sliding down a couple of seats, that's Samantha Liebman
But I can't let it pass without just reminding everybody that this is the week that we find out who's got what priorities, because we're celebrating a year into having a balanced budget for 5 years. I went and did my budget here in Albany because Kathy Hochul, with the support of the legislature, solved the transit budget crisis, the fiscal cliff brought on by COVID, 100%. And in New Jersey, they're focused on drivers, but they haven't solved the fiscal crisis, and the only solution so far is to hit the riders for 15% more fares without dealing with the whole scale of a 25% budget crisis. We solved ours, it was 12%. They won't address their 25% budget crisis. They just raised the turnpike tolls. Where is that money going? I know some of it was supposed to go to transit, then an election happened, so the turnpike tolls didn't get raised for a while. No one said whether any money is going to transit. Meantime, New Jersey Transit seems to every couple days have a complete shutdown because of they and Amtrak have a signaling and communication system that keeps falling apart. My general counsel, Paige Graves, lives in New Jersey, and last night we were sitting here at 7 o'clock wondering how she was going to get home or whether she had to borrow a cot to stay in the office because New Jersey Transit was out of business. So, we can keep talking about automobile drivers. Hudson County, 90% mass transit community. Essex County, I think 85% mass transit commuters. That's New Jersey commuters. We keep only talking about the drivers. When are we going to start talking about all those New Jersey commuters? Phil Murphy's not on the ballot in Brownsville. He's not on the ballot in Far Rockaway. He's not on the ballot in Washington Heights. But those people aren't going to get the quality of railroad service, of subway service that they ought to have because New Jersey doesn't want us to be able to toll our own roads like they toll their own roads in New Jersey. Not nice.
All right, a patient Sam Liebman right there from New York 1. Sam.
So what happened with the federal grant for the Penn Station redevelopment in December? Was it rejected, and why? And how is it going with cooperation from Amtrak and New Jersey Transit?
So the federal government, for the first time, this is a new Federal Railroad Administration program, the so-called Fed-State Partnership Program, and they put out a lot of money for major projects. MTA did really well. We got, I think, $1 billion for the Penn Access project, right? $1.2 billion. What? $1.6 billion. $1.6 billion for the Penn Access project, which is a really important project. It's going to make it connect people in the East Bronx to commuter rail service for the first time ever. So those people's commutes literally will be cut in half, and they'll be able to go for jobs in Westchester and Connecticut that they never have been before. So that was huge support for us. They funded a lot of projects. They didn't fund some. We had a relatively smaller request in for design money for the Penn project. Got turned down, but we're going to apply again.
And is Amtrak and New Jersey Transit cooperating?
Yeah, I think on reapplying, absolutely.
My other question is on the fare arrays. You said you picked these because they were readily available, but in Washington, D.C., they have these fare arrays that they say reduced fare evasion by 70%, that have these very high plexiglass doors that go over the side. I mean, the teams, and then you showed all of these other arrays in May. Why not go with those? I mean, I understand Cubic makes these and maybe the integration was easier, but why not try some of this other?
In fairness, the acquisition of this particular set, which was focused mostly on the accessibility issues, having a wide out gate, was executed. That was set in motion before the broad outreach began on all the different fare arrays. We might, in retrospect, have chosen a different model, but the main thing is we're experimenting. That one was mostly about people with bags coming from JFK and accessibility, availability. But we're going to continue to experiment. This is not what we're putting in the whole system, and it's being adjusted to deal with some of its shortcomings. Oh, yeah, point taken. We have the RFI for all of for a new fare array model out now, and we're dealing with all these companies, some of which you mentioned. When is that due to come back, Jamie? In the next few weeks or so.
All right, we're moving on, going out east now to Newsday's own Alfonso Castillo at his undisclosed Valley Stream location, where he's brought the big giant microphone. Alfonso.
I just checked the schedule, Alfonso. There's a train that left Valley Stream 5 minutes ago. You could be with us. It only had 100 people on it.
I was not.
It only had 100 people on it. It had a capacity of almost 1,000.
Yes, I wasn't one of them, and that ties into one of my questions. So I wanted to ask you about congestion pricing. I have been going through the environmental assessment with an eye for impacts on Long Island, and I know some folks there have questioned some of my takes, but at the very least, it looks like it says that the difference in vehicle miles traveled for Long Island commuters would be negligible. I thought it was a slight increase. I'm told it was a slight decrease, but it does look like there would be added traffic at the Queens Midtown Tunnel that would increase at least the time getting into Manhattan. It says 2% up to 2% increase on ridership of Long Island Railroad, which would mean 1,000 fewer seats for Long Island commuters, and obviously the $15 toll. This is all to say for opponents of congestion pricing on Long Island, and there's a lot of them. How do you sell this to them? What are the benefits for Long Island commuters?
Okay, so just on the stats, obviously, congestion pricing. There are something like 30 to 40,000 Long Islanders who drive. That the fact that the overall VMT on Long Island is not moving is not a function of congestion pricing or not. It's a very big place with a lot of people driving around. But the other message of those numbers is there are very few Long Island drivers. We're always talking about them rather than the 80+% who take mass transit, who are going to benefit from this tremendously. There are only your second point, which is, I guess, does the Long Island Railroad have capacity to absorb the couple thousand people who are coming off of driving onto mass transit? Just a reminder, I think you know this stuff. We're carrying about 230,000 people a day on the Long Island Railroad right now in a system which is running 77,000 more trains a year, which has 40% more service than it did before Grand Central Madison opened. And even in the old days, before Grand Central Madison opened, before the pandemic, we were carrying more than 300,000 people. So there is a lot more room on the Long Island Railroad. There is 47% capacity ridership is 47% of capacity in the AM peak and 54% of capacity in the PM peak. So we have a lot of room. There are and there are very few people who are going to be moving from driving to the railroad because there are very few people who are driving to begin with. Now, as respects the Queens Midtown Tunnel, I think what you're looking at in the EA is we're obligated in order to get the FONSI to study the worst case scenario. In that case, that was assuming that we had eliminated the incentive for people to go to the free bridges entirely, right, Alfonso? And that was the scenario that was being studied. What the TMRB has recommended, which is now moving its way through the hearings process, is a much lower crossing credit, which would not eliminate the incentive for people to go to the free bridges entirely, although it would reduce it. So that you're not talking about the right scenario when you're citing those numbers. Does that make sense?
I understand what you're saying. That's not my reading of it, and I think what I read actually does spell out some credit and not necessarily a full credit, and it talked about reducing the disparity between the tolls and not necessarily eliminating it. So my reading of it is that it's exactly what's
okay. So let's not debate it, but at least what we probably could agree on is if there are 17 to 20% less traffic in Manhattan, for those people who do have to drive, they're going to have less traffic to deal with once they get to Manhattan. We're probably best not to debate the Queens Midtown Tunnel, but less traffic in general will make for faster rides in the places where they're getting the most traffic, which is the CBD, where they're wasting a lot of time.
All right, next up is Michelle Caskey. She's center stage from Bloomberg News. Michelle.
Hi, thanks. In the past, you've estimated that fare evasion costs almost $700 million a year, but that was back from that estimate was off of 2022. What's your estimate for 2023 in terms of?
I don't have a final estimate, but I think it hasn't dropped, and it probably goes up a little bit because when we raised our fares 4%, that inevitably means that if you do the multiplication, the numbers are going to go up. So whatever version of hundreds of millions of dollars it is, this is as I say, a huge threat to the viability of the MTA, and it's also a huge threat to the morale of New Yorkers who, believe in public transit and who, want to be able to feel like they're not suckers when they do pay their fares, as most do.
But earlier today, you also referred to it as it's the solution to it is it's a long-term, and that's going to take an extended period of time. It's not going to happen in, obviously, as
Michelle,
we've seen.
if you have short-term solutions that'll knock 100 million or whatever big number off it, please share them. But there's no question that what has transpired is that the rules of how do you use the public space in New York, which is incredibly important because, New York is all about density and shared public space. A lot of the compliance broke down. We're seeing a lot of different areas of life, and this is one. And we have to move back to where we were before COVID, which was, probably a third of, in terms of the amount of fare evasion, about a third of what it is now. And it starts with that exit gate that we're working on.
All right, let's move a couple of seats down to Dave Colon from Streets Blog and the Knicks. There they are, right, Dave? The Knicks.
The Knicks are the sole holders of third place and the hottest team in the NBA. Jano,
Best January in 30 years, I heard someone say.
14-2, tied a team record. So, Jano, I wanted to ask, 5 years ago or so, Andy Byford showed up and he had the Fast Forward plan. It was this blueprint that really emphasized resignaling the subways, CBTC upgrades, as far as the eye can see, and that really informed the capital plan that we're living in right now, given the amount of money that was spent or set aside for it for signal upgrades, train cars that can take advantage of those signals, and really promised very specific areas of CBTC improvement. I'm wondering, as we get into this next capital plan, we're in the last year of this one, can you talk about philosophically, do you want to finish that map that was in Fast Forward? Do you want to finish that work? Is the theme of this next capital plan going to be CBTC everywhere still?
Yeah, I mean, listen, I don't remember exactly what was, the CBTC plan that was contemplated in Fast Forward was not funded. What we then got was a capital plan which had a certain amount of money for signaling, and we were pushing forward very much on that. We're doing it on the Culver line, the F train. We're doing it on the Queens Boulevard line. And we're doing it on the different parts of the 8th Avenue line, the A train that I keep talking about. So we are passionate about it. It, to me, is a fundamental equity issue that Central Brooklyn and Washington Heights and some of those other places should get the full benefit of modern signaling. We're also focused, as we become more expert, we're looking at using resignaling not just on whole lines, but on targeted areas where there are choke points in the system. On the 6th Avenue line, in particular, in Manhattan, in the Central Business District, you have switches and interlockings and technology that dates from the Franklin Roosevelt administration and that is constraining the whole line from operating more frequently and more reliably. So we're learning as we go, and we have very much a commitment to resignaling. One of the challenges, and I think you alluded to it, is the capacity of the car manufacturing industry to provide at a price we can afford cars that are CBTC equipped. And that's one of the reasons that I have commissioned a major study, which I think we're on the verge of awarding now, a major study of the whole rail car manufacturing industry in America. Remember, we have a Buy America law that requires us to purchase cars that are manufactured in the United States. And right now we have only two companies that we can buy from, Alstom and Kawasaki, and they're both not, their capacity issues have been real, both of them, their ability to produce cars at volume. So we're taking a hard look in a systematic way at how do we grow, what needs to be done at the level of national policy and also New York policy to grow the capacity of the subway rail car industry going forward.
Do you think that CBTC is going to be the theme of the next capital plan?
It'll certainly be one of the themes because it's such a proven success story for New York. And look at the change that was made on the number 7. Weeks after we turned CBTC on the number 7 line, we went from I think 68% on-time performance to something in the high 80s or low 90s, and that's continued. So we can really, really improve people's commutes if we continue investing in modern signaling.
All right, moving on.
Oh, wait,
So we gotta move on. We got other people here. Ben Brockfeld's been so patient from AM New York. He's right there. Ben.
It's true, I am a patient guy.
But dangerous for you to go at the end, in my experience, right?
Yeah, I'm usually over on that side, I've noticed. But I wanted to ask about the IBX. The MTA had said that they had to do street running for the light rail in Queens around a cemetery, the All Faith Cemetery. I spoke with the cemetery director there. He said that the MTA never spoke with him about that proposal. He hadn't even heard of it until I talked to him. And when I asked him what he thinks about tunneling under the cemetery, he said it would be, it'd be complicated, but it would be possible. And, they'd be willing to work with you guys, but you never spoke with them. So I was wondering, is the MTA going to talk to them about the possibility of running a tunnel under that cemetery? And, and what are some of the other challenges?
I never thought I would thank anybody for a shidduch with a cemetery director, but here we are. So we're looking at that issue. Jamie. Thank you, Samantha.
We do want to thank you for getting some of our outreach started on this important project. This project is in the early stages of environmental review. We're very excited the governor has directed us to begin design in the state, and we're preparing for that. And of course, all of the relevant options and all the outreach will be conducted as part of those processes. So that's all coming up, and we're excited to do that because it's a great project for Brooklyn and Queens and the whole city and the whole system.
But it's confident that it won't be cut and cover through the cemetery, right, Jamie? Okay, good.
All right, next up from, I believe, the newsroom of the New York Times. Is that what that is? Anna Lay, coming to you live, sir, from 8th Avenue and 41st Street. Anna.
Hi, yeah, from the Metro desk. Jen, I'm curious if you're using behavioral experts or sociologists to examine the demographics of the people who commit offenses, and the people who are getting caught and why they're doing it, and whatever you're able to find. Are you planning to make adjustments based on what you observe?
What, Anna, could you repeat that? Like behavioral experts looking at whom?
Looking at the demographics of the people who commit fair evasion. Sorry, I'm like on an echo here.
No, I think what we're seeing is that it's become really widespread, Anna. It's up and down. It's in every neighborhood. It's in my stop in Brooklyn. It's in every demographic in the city. And that's one of the things that's so alarming. The thing that I am focused on is opportunistic fare evasion. People who might be playing by the rules in other parts of their lives, but who see the gate open and go for it, even though they know better, because it has become so widespread that there's a herd mentality and an acceptability that's crept into our system. So we definitely want to start with deterring opportunistic fare evasion. A determined fare evader, somebody who's willing to crawl under the turnstile or could vault over it, which we're going to try to address with design, is harder to address, but we want to definitely start with folks who are new fare evaders, and there are a lot of them since COVID began. Now, today, I just got to remind all of us that somebody crawled under the turnstile who's a determined fare evader, was stopped at 183rd Street on the 4 line, and was carrying an automatic weapon with an extended magazine and 27 rounds in it. And one of the benefits of fare evasion enforcement, which is not the principal activity of the NYPD in the system, as you know from riding around, is that we are catching people with weapons. And that is just this month, it's up to 10. Just this month, 10 guns in the New York City subway system, and 6 of them were lassoed through fare evasion enforcement. So it has huge safety benefits in addition to fairness issues and economic benefits.
All right, next is Steve Nesson down there from Gothamist and WNYC and Public Radio. Steve.
Hello, Chair.
Hi.
Thanks. I just want to ask about the Outer Borough Transportation Fund.
Yeah.
While I know the MTA doesn't decide where the money goes, the MTA is offering $22 million in discounts for drivers. Are you sending a mixed message to the public, particularly New Jersey drivers, that congestion pricing is about discouraging driving on the one hand, but you're also giving a massive incentive to some drivers with these rebates on the other? How do you square that?
Listen, the Outer Borough Transportation Account, as you said, is a decision. Where that money goes is a decision of the legislature. Principally, we're not really in a position to, we don't make those decisions. And they were also, a lot of that, the rebates that you're talking about were commitments that were made long ago. I do think that your point, though, is not wrong, which is the future revenues of the Outer Borough Transportation Account. There should be investments in, it should include investments in making transit more attractive or more affordable. One of the things that was talked about in the past was funding discounts on commuter rail within the city of New York. And you know what? We didn't wait for the Outer Borough Transportation Account to fill up and to argue for that investment. We did it. So we think that as it continues to collect resources, there should be transit investments seriously considered as part of that deal.
All right, we're going to close out the proceedings today with Evan Simcoe Bednarski of the New York Daily News. Evan.
Hey, Jenna. So another fare evasion question for you. We've got the new fare array RFI. We've got plans to limit the use of the emergency gates. These are all subway focused plans. My understanding is that bus fare evasion continues to drive the problem. I think it's something like 46% at this point, fare evaders on buses total. And in August, there was an effort to really step up the Eagle teams, a whole NYPD, arrangement to support them. Can you talk a little bit more about what else, if anything, can be done on buses, the extent to which that's part of the problem?
Yeah.
Help my readers understand that.
Yeah, no, it is. Your point is well taken. It is a very big piece of the problem, and it's this especially big issue for a couple reasons. One, we got people accustomed to not paying during COVID, right? We roped off the front of the bus because we were trying to protect drivers from spread in the early days of COVID, and people got accustomed to getting on the back, and they were told not to pay. It's hard to reestablish behavior. Two is a lot of bus riders are students, and they may actually have, in many cases, prepaid Metro cards in their bag, but they don't pull them out. There's clearly an issue of educating our students that we do need them to swipe or tap and so on. And there are a lot of strategies that are being developed about how to get those kids onto their phones, which are always in their hands, right? They're much nearer at hand than a Metro card they may bury in their book bag. I've seen it happen myself. So there's no question that we have to come up with new strategies. Police enforcement is part of it. We are hiring new Eagle Teams members. I think we have, somebody help me, how many we're come on up. We have 40 plus Eagle Team members that we're in the process of hiring. We have worked more closely to add, although the NYPD is not riding the buses, they're supporting the Eagle Teams at hubs. So we've upgraded that. And we're looking, and we've actually moved some of the Eagle Teams to plainclothes, so that it's not just a matter of, I see there's somebody on this bus, so I'll wait for the next one, and so on. So we're definitely, but this is an area where the physical barriers that we focus on more in the subway environment have to be complemented by a lot of education and a lot of change of behavior, and we have maybe a longer way to go on that process. As a result. Rich.
I mean, Evan, the only thing I would add is one other thing we're looking at is making sure that the Metro card readers and the Omni readers on buses are working, right? So, I've seen from time to time that a customer does want to pay, but our machines aren't working, and so that's something else we're looking at. But Jano's right. This is going to be a big challenge for us, and one that is probably going to be a multi-year effort. We reported out at committee on Monday. One of our top 5 goals in New York City Transit this year is to get our arms around fare evasion, because respectfully, we are the bulk of that issue at MTA.
You mentioned that there's a move to put some of the Eagle Teams in plain clothes.
Yeah.
Eagle Teams have been operating at a higher level, so to speak, since August. Do you have any data on what's worked and what hasn't? Has there, I look at the data of fare evasion, it looks like it's been kind of just going up since then. What have you, obviously you've learned something by having the plainclothes option.
Yeah.
What else have you learned?
So, the plainclothes are very early days. Like, we've literally deployed in the last couple of weeks. I don't think we have data there yet. But to your question on the 3 clusters, looking at the growth of fare evasion relative to those 3 clusters, we've seen an improvement. But it's not nearly enough of we want to see. Just having a handful of Eagle Team members, 15, 20, knowing we have thousands of bus stops, is a challenge. What I think we're also looking at is things like, in the future, can we harden the ability to capture fare? So, for example, Staten Island Ferry, could we have a fare array there? And that's something that we're considering in the future. But suffice to say, we have a long way to go, and I think no idea will be too challenged. I look forward to being criticized in the future for piloting more things and seeing if they work or not.
All right, thank you, Jano, Rich, Jamie, and for the cameo, Paige Graves. Good afternoon, everybody from Lower Manhattan.